Hello and welcome to the Tetracast. I'm your host, Brian Vitale, and joining me today, we've got the full regular crew. I've got James Galizio.
Hey, folks.
I've got Josh Torres.
Oh, I'm part of the regular crew now? Sweet. I've been promoted.
Yes. We've got Adam Vitale.
Hey, guys.
We've got George Foster.
Hello, everyone.
So we are wrapping up January. Hopefully this year has been going better compared to previous years. I can't believe we're already looking February square in the eye. So exciting things ahead. And we've got a lot to talk about. All those things that were kind of like wrapped up in embargo tape and, under the covers and not able to be revealed just yet. Now, a lot of it we can talk about now. So that'll be a major focus of this podcast. We've got a bunch of reviews, a couple features, some news bits, not a lot on that specific regard. Also, if you are listening to us on YouTube, the plan is, at least as of recording, is that this will be the first podcast in like 6 years to go up on YouTube. We just figured, hey, why not? We're already pushing the Tetracast over to Spotify and Google Podcasts, and we used to be on YouTube, so why not go back there again? Though,
yeah, if you're listening to this on YouTube, like let us know in the comments as well. What do you think? Give us feedback on what do you think we should do better, or if we're doing great. Just let us know. We'll read the comments for sure.
And it's kind of one of those things where when the last time the Tetracast was on YouTube, I don't think there's any overlap between those contributors and the five of us here. So it's kind of like the ship of Theseus or whatever it's called, where it's like if you replace all the parts, is it still the same podcast? Maybe, maybe not. Mull over that. Of course, if you're listening to us through Spotify or Google Podcasts or whatever, feel free to leave us comments and thumbs up or thumbs down there. Whatever you feel, be honest. So without further ado...
We read everything. We read everything, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And without further ado, I guess we'll just kind of be going. This will be a little bit of a combo start where we'll be talking about games we've been playing, which will overlap with some features that have been written for the site, obviously, because we've got a bunch. I've got listed here 4 different reviews that have gone up, 3 of them pretty major. And I guess I'll just start up in the order that they... I want to say that the order that they were published, but I actually don't know what the order is. Let's see. It looks like the first one that went up was James's review on Atelier Ryza 2, Lost Legends, and the Secret Fairy. So this is the game that you've been poking away at. You got this game pretty early, so just go ahead and, take it away.
I don't think we actually got the proper review copy that early, as far as things are concerned. We did get a copy very early on for the preview we pushed out that Colin did a couple of months back, I want to say, and that actually did end up transferring to a full copy as well. But anyways,
yeah, there's always that weird dichotomy, like preview copy versus review copy, when it's only really by arbitrary dates.
Well, yeah, that's only really been a thing that's really started to crop up in a larger way, like in the last couple of months or year, I'd say, because of the pandemic. Because normally, if you were going to do a preview, for example, a year ago, I did previews for a couple of games at NAS America's HQ before the pandemic really started, and usually that's how you'd have preview articles go up, is that the company would invite you to their headquarters or someplace, and there would either be a press event where you just play some games, and that's it. So, a bit different.
And now it's being held through either here's just a code, have fun, or here's a preview event in something like on Discord or something else, where they'll stream some footage over to you and do it hands off. So lots of learning processes over the last year about other potential avenues to do these sorts of things. Yeah.
Anyways, though, so I wanted to talk about it last week, but obviously I was under embargo. I really enjoyed Ryza 2. It's kind of funny, because if you had told me last year that I was going to get into the Atelier franchise, I probably wouldn't have believed you, but somehow that kind of just happened. Because I played Atelier Ryza, I got through most of Esken Logi, I played Ryza 1, now I've played Ryza 2. It's, yeah. I feel like and I kind of said this in my review, that Ryza 2 is so impressive for how long Gus actually had to work on it, because they basically only had a single year of development after Ryza 1, which is insane considering that, first off, Ryza 2 is longer than Ryza 1. Obviously, there's some reused assets, which Gus has always done for like follow-up titles in the Atelier franchise and whatnot, but still really impressive. Like,
and the 1 year they had was like the year.
Yeah, the pandemic and all that. The number of upgrades, not just to the like, there's so many different things that they tweaked that are really surprising considering how little time they had. Like, Ryza 1 didn't really have any proper dungeons. Well, and Atelier doesn't usually have dungeons in the first place. But they decided, okay, the big deal with this one is there's going to be these ruins are basically dungeons, and there's going to be a whole system for like progressing through them, and there's this really fascinating like memory fragments and literally piecing together the lore and history of these ancient civilizations and the backstory for the Ryza world. It's fascinating.
Okay,
really,
so
really fascinating.
so to someone who doesn't really, I don't really keep up with Atelier games all that much. Like I played Verona, Totori, some of the very older ones, like even as far back as Marie, and the Atelier Iris and all that stuff. Like I played a few of them here and there, and then like Ryza 2 is also a big deal because it's been like it's the first like I think direct sequel to an Atelier game holding the same protagonist like in quite a while, I think, right? And then
I actually read that even though there was like Iris 1, 2, 3, they still had different protagonists. I think.
Yeah, they did. So and like so how far along is this from like the previous one? Like how many months or years passed?
3 years later.
Okay.
And I actually really like that they took a chance to have the same protagonist, mainly the same cast this time around, because I mean, Ryza 1's story and characters were fine, but I feel like what they've done in Ryza 2 with actually showing how they've grown and how they're much more mature, and like the whole adventure this time around isn't just, oh, we're kids, we want to go on an adventure, and it's more we're trying to figure out what we want to do in life, and we're focusing on it, and it's like it's still not a deep story, but it's like more mature.
I think that's where I fell off
closer.
Yeah, because I got maybe 15, 20 hours into Ryza 1, and I just eventually fell off because a lot of it was just like it felt like it wasn't really going anywhere in terms of like focus. It was just like, yeah, we're just going on adventures, going away from like the place we live, and sometimes here and there. And it kind of felt like too
listless.
slow. Yeah, exactly. It was like kind of meandering a bit. So that's kind of where I fell off. But I'm hearing a lot of really good things. Do I have to finish Ryza 1 or like push myself through that? Like get the most.
If you're in like 15 hours in Ryza 1, I'd say push yourself through it, because the very end of Ryza 1 has a bit more story. It's not amazing, but it's something, and I do feel like you do get more out of Ryza 2 if you finish Ryza 1 at least. But yeah, it's like, for example, like each of the party members, like even just looking at Tao, for example, like he was like a nerdy kid, super, super tiny in the first game, and it was just like that one archetype of like the bookworm. And he's still a bookworm, but like in 3 years, he's more confident after the adventure, and he shows it. He's grown up, like literally, so he's not a scrawny little kid anymore. He's got a bit of suave attitude to him in combat that's really kind of cool to see. And then there's also stuff like pretty much all the other characters that return. There's just slight changes to them, and it's nice because the baseline it's not a reset. There has been development after Ryza 1 that you don't see, but makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the story and like the character like moments are the fact that it's been 3 years, and it's like, man, we've really changed in 3 years. Being an adult is kind of hard.
Yeah,
I do like games that allow events to take place off screen. Like us as the witness to this story aren't beholden to see everything, absolutely anything of consequence. So in that 3-year gap, does that happen where there are certain like key moments that are reflected on that happen between the two games?
Yes, for at least one of the characters, there's something like that.
And I know not everyone has that mindset, but I really enjoy that, because to me it just makes the world feel appropriately large, where otherwise if everything of any consequence appears on stage for our eyes to witness, that makes the world just feel small, and like the only things that matter are the things that we have direct control over. And I like it when games allow that to happen, where it's like, here are some, like this is going to sound really corny, but like in real life, sometimes you got to piece together things and conversations and events that you weren't present for or whatever.
Yeah, it's more like the game is portraying a window into the world rather than like the world in its entirety is on display.
Yeah, and that's like, and that ties really into what I really like about the game, which is the ruin system. Like, the dungeons themselves are interesting enough. I feel like they have good layouts. They look fantastic, which is one thing that I really stressed on in my review. But, okay, so I'll just talk about the dungeons for a bit. The number one thing I love about them is the way that the alchemy system is actually tied into them. In the sense that, so whenever you first get into a ruin, you have like 5 objectives that you can complete in order to eventually unlock the compass that lets you find memory fragments throughout the dungeon. And it's neat because on paper it sounds like padding, because it's like you're exploring the dungeon, then you unlock these memory fragments and you have to search for them throughout the dungeon again. But the fact that once you get to them, sometimes they have like ghosts of people from the past and dialogue, and you actually have some lore that you can pick up on, and usually where they're placed, there's actual lore about the section of the ruin that you found them in, and just looking around gives you a little bit of information too. That's really cool. But so, like I said in my review, in order to progress through through the game, you have to piece together at least one subject of information in each ruin. And that's the one that has a gold border. And if you do that, you get a synthesis recipe, which allows you to make something to continue on in the dungeon. And the interesting thing about those is that once you synthesize them and use them, the dungeons change to a certain extent. Some more than others, but all of them change. Like the very first dungeon that you use this in, there was like all these bells in the background and they start ringing, and suddenly new types of enemies spawn, and obviously you can move forward. There was one where you synthesize something, you place it down, and then all of these trees that were maybe blocking like side paths or whatnot are now on fire, and some of them that were blocking the paths are just gone, so you can progress further. Now the whole dungeon is like ablaze with these trees that are like on fire, which is really, really cool, especially in these areas of the dungeon that are wide open, so you can just see the dotted blazing trees like all around you, which is a really interesting scope. Like, and that's what I meant when I said that it feels really impressive they managed to get this done in only a year, because this feels like, and I kind of said this like internally, like in the staff chat, this feels like more, less of a derivative sequel than from Nioh 1 to Nioh 2 in a lot of ways.
So just production values, level of polish, that sort of thing. Is that basically kind of what you're getting at? Is just that it feels like this could have easily been more. This could have easily been more obviously a year-long project or 18 months or whatever, but instead... Oh,
definitely. Yeah.
And not to bury the lead a bit, but so obviously James wrote a review for this up on the site, and you scored it a 9, which is, very, very, very high praise. So that is something where I guess right off the bat, as this is like one of the major January releases for the site, I guess the Atelier games usually kind of always, at least from my perspective as an outsider, it feels like they kind of have this sort of cap to them where they're good but never great. But here you're basically saying, no, this game you could make an argument that it is great, and you've scored it that way.
Yep. And I really want to talk about some more. Not going to say exactly what it says, but there's the story itself for Ryza 2, which is just the base thing of, hey, we're exploring these ruins. Hey, there's this fairy. Hey, we're just exploring these ruins with this fairy. It's really simple, but there is some more to it that I hope that Ryza 3 expands upon, because if you look into and actually really delve into the ruins and the memory fragment stuff and like put everything together, there is an interesting backstory there, and there is like some interesting characters there that the game didn't need to have, but it really sells the idea of the whole system of looking back into the past and figuring out what happened. And I feel like it's a really interesting framing for Ryza's character arc, because the whole thing that she was doing in between those 3 years is she started teaching kids on her island, and she's been looking into the history of alchemy. So it just the framing of it as, instead of this just being an adventure for adventure's sake, but she's doing it for research, the way that the systems like come into play actually makes that feel like a legitimate aspect of her character, and it really sells it a lot better.
Cool. Yeah, I can definitely see the appeal. Like there's like a neat archaeological like angle to it, but it's like the premise is like it's just basically like a teacher professor is going on these like adventures to like better teach her class, essentially.
Well, sometimes
maybe
video
not
games
exactly
have
that,
this,
but something similar. Yeah.
I was going to say sometimes video games have this sense of artifice or whatever, where you just kind of have to take it like, well, you have to have a game at some point. So of course you're going to be going into dungeons, and there'll probably be some sort of battles, and you just kind of have to be like, well, eventually you take your project and throw it into the framework of a video game. Where here it sounds like they've gone a little bit of a step further, and it's not so much artificial. It actually feels like this makes sense. This jives. There's a through line here that works with the setting and the characters within it.
Yeah, and again, read my review if you want my full thoughts. It's one of the longer reviews I've written. Had a lot to say about it, but my main takeaway was that Ryza 2 was good enough in a year that I really, really want to see what Gust could do with a Ryza 3 if they had a proper, non-normal Gust dev cycle. If they had like 3 years or something like that. Because there's so many upgrades from Ryza 1 to Ryza 2, but there's just enough underneath the surface that you can tell if they had a little bit more budget, a little bit more time, they could make something really, really special. And I want to be able to see what Gust could do.
I wonder what it's going to take, though, for them to get out of the normal Gust schedule. Like the yearly releases, sometimes releasing 2 to 3 games a year, which is insane. But like, I wish they got more time too. But I don't know what it will take to convince higher ups to like say, "Hey, give us more time to like develop and release these games."
Well, unfortunately, it feels like the quality of a game doesn't correlate at all with how many copies it sells. But typically, direct sequels like this, it'll be interesting to see how Ryza 2 does, because Ryza 1, I feel like, was a breath of fresh air, and it sold really well relative to the rest of the games in the series. How much of a drop off is there going to be in Ryza 2? And I know that sounds so cynical. Like, who cares? If it's a great game, it's a great game. But when we're talking about following up sequel, how much dev time and budget and effort and logistically in that way, how much they'll support a follow up, that's going to matter a little bit more to the suits, or however you want to cynically put it. So I'm interested to see how well it does. Hopefully it doesn't have much of a drop off at all. Hopefully the good word of mouth, and it has reviewed very well, like across the board to my perspective. So hopefully this is worrying about nothing, and hopefully it ends up being, financially prudent for them to keep on this track and really knock it out of the park with a third game in a trilogy.
I guess at this moment in time, like, there's no newly announced or known revealed new Atelier games on the horizon, as far as I can tell. So
yeah, I'm with you.
We're like in a weird
this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler, but Ryza 3 is definitely happening, because there's some aspects in Ryza 2 where it's basically outright telling you that a Ryza 3 will happen. So.
Oh yeah, I did that. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. Of course they would. Like, Ryza at the moment is a very popular protagonist, popular Atelier character. Like a lot of people just love her in general, and it's cool. That's cool to see. I'm just trying to think. Like, as far as we know, like, Gust has no new games coming after this. Right now, obviously, like, they haven't announced anything new or revealed anything, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, because I'm so used to always like Gus is always really good at like, oh, we're teasing this, we're revealing this, or like there's a countdown site for something. You know? But right now, at this very moment in time.
Well, yeah, because we had that one year, like 2019, where they released 3 Atelier games, and then of course they had Fairy Tail recently, and going back further, they had.
Totally forgot about Fairy Tail. Thank you for reminding me. I forgot.
But yeah, now that they've got nothing in queue that we're aware of, which of course could be tied to pandemic and Corona, and who knows?
Yeah.
No events last year to hold that sort of thing where they would announce it. Maybe you could speculate all day and night.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I was like, no, that upcoming Eden Zero game, that's not them. That's actually Konami, I think. Just
yep.
Yeah. Huh.
Any other final thoughts on Ryza 2?
It's a very good video game, and if you haven't, well, okay, so I feel like it's a shame that Ryza 2 is a direct sequel in one way, and that's because it feels structured more like a traditional JRPG, which I feel like a lot of people that maybe aren't already into Atelier will jive with a lot more than the previous games. But that doesn't help matters when Ryza 1 is still kind of, it's not necessary, but like highly recommended to play first.
Yeah, so I think just all the good word of mouth about this game, like I'm definitely more motivated now to get Atelier Ryza 1 done, and then because I think I would like this game a lot from what people have told me, both you and other friends who are playing it.
Another review that went up this month was actually a bit of a late one, but that's something that we've always kind of been 100% fine with. Sometimes just having a different sort of reviewing environment that you're not beholden to an embargo and you can really like stew with your thoughts and things like that. I'm basically just covering my butt for all the late reviews that I've written. But we also got one from George this month where he wrote up a review for Immortals Fenyx Rising. So this came out in December of last year, but it was just kind of at the time where we were doing our end of the year things. We weren't 100% sure how RPG this was or how much we wanted to cover it. But we kind of went into the start of 2021. George had a few, the inclination and a gap in his schedule to go ahead and cover it for us. So he put up a review for Immortals. So George, how do we feel about this Zelda-like from you this oft?
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm really, really impressed with it. I feel like I've defended it a little bit over the past couple of podcasts we've done. But then when I finally like properly finished it, I just weirdly I couldn't stop playing. You guys know I talk about it all the time that I don't really put much time into like games. Like I won't go 60 hours into this, 60 hours into that. I'll usually finish to the credits and then like I've usually made up my mind about it, or at least I've had my fill. But with Immortals, I don't know what it was. I just kept playing. Like I just kept trying to find the loot. I kept trying to beat all the like legendary bosses. It's just a ton of fun. And yeah, I think this is my first ever late review, and I completely agree with you guys. Like it's so much better to write a review when you're not like under pressure at all. Like I finished Immortals. I didn't even like write the review straight after finishing it. But I don't know. I feel like it's one of my better reviews. I was reading through it again. I was like, yeah, I feel like this is something I actually talked about because I wanted to talk about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, you can. It's just nice that you can review it on your own time, and it's like if I take an extra day or 2 or 3 to kind of, wordsmith it up or think about it, sleep on it, you can do that. Whereas if you're trying to hit an embargo, like I got to get the review up by Friday or whatever, it's just
add me next time, Adam.
Yeah.
No, it's like when I do a review, I'm burying the lead a bit here, as Brian likes to say, but
so it's like a bit more in consciousness, right? Like it's like you're not really thinking about like, oh, like I have to like cover like these aspects of the game like in a rigid structure. It's kind of more of a stream of consciousness. Whatever comes to mind, I'm gonna put it on paper.
Yeah, exactly. And the main takeaways are I really enjoyed pretty much every aspect of it. I don't think
okay, I need to be a little bit more specified than that.
Okay. So well, yeah, literally everything it does. So I really liked
okay.
its graphics. I actually really liked its story. The gameplay was really good fun. The only element of it that I didn't love were the puzzles. I think I talked about it a little bit last week. They're rigid and they don't always define exactly what they want to do. So I'm running around feeling like a dum-dum because I can't figure out this puzzle in this like Ubisoft game. I'm like, why am I so stupid? Why can't I figure this out? And then the answer was like in front of me the whole time, but the game like neglects to tell you that. I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but one of my references is that there's this puzzle late on in the game where you have to. I think I must have talked about this last week because I'm
you
saying
you talked about how you had to like travel really far distance away to get like a bomb or something, and it felt like, I know this will work, but is this what they intended me to do? I don't know. They haven't really paved the way very clearly about what the intent actually was.
Is there like one of those, like for example in Breath of the Wild, it's for some of the ruins, like there's a lot of like solutions to it depending on how you manipulate the physics and what tools they give you to like mess around with it. In Immortals, is it more rigid than that, or can you at least like manipulate some aspect of physics of the game to like reach a solution?
This is it. This is what's weird. It doesn't really. It lets you very occasionally, and then you can never understand if that's like the rule or if that's an exception. So, like the one example where I had to run off and get a boulder to use instead of a crate, it just left me thinking, like, is that the rule? Like, have I been able to do that the whole time and I've just been completely neglecting it? But like, I swear, I went back to other puzzles. You could never do that. The game would never let you do that. And then just this one puzzle expected you to. And maybe that's a good thing. Like to some people, that's like, oh, that's cool. They've mixed it around a bit. But I just didn't really enjoy any of the puzzles that much. I was kind of glad when they were all over. I think what it suffers from is that the puzzles in the open world mess around with it a lot more like that. But most of the puzzles are found inside these vaults that don't let you mess around. So like they're called vaults. They're basically the same thing as shrines in Breath of the Wild. And if you remember, in shrines you can't climb walls, you can't do certain things.
Yeah,
the same as that. And they have like set rules, and that's fine. Like I understand when I'm in a vault, I can't go climb on everything. But then in the open world, they mess around with it like a little bit more, and you're just used to how it is in the vaults, and you just don't expect the game to have that sort of creativity because it still doesn't do it very often. So maybe I'm up in arms about something that doesn't matter, but puzzles are a pretty big part of Immortals, like a really surprisingly big part of it, which I didn't expect going in. So that would be my one. I don't know if I'd call it a major flaw because I still did all of them, but my biggest takeaway is that if you don't like puzzles, then I don't know if I'd play it. But the rest of it's
I know, like future DLC aside, because I know there's going to be upcoming DLC. I think one's basically like on the either came out just recently or is coming.
Yeah, it came out the other day. Yeah.
Like some of those are like going to switch up like the gameplay. Like one of those going to be like isometric, I think, and whatnot. Like aside, like pushing that aside for a bit, like. Would you like to see a sequel or follow up to Immortals? And if you would, like, what would you like to see, like, changed or improved or enhanced?
I would love to see a sequel to Immortals. Like so I gave it an 8, and I was really happy with it. But I kind of feel like with this DLC they're doing, at least for the case of the Chinese mythology one, like that could be its own game in its entirety. Like I don't know how big they're going to go with it because I don't really know. They haven't revealed too much of the scope, but it looks like it could be its own game. So I don't know. I kind of wish they'd just done that. Like do Immortals, and I think what's the character called? Like I don't know, Ku. I think it's called like Immortals. Ku's Rising. That'd be awesome. I'd be so down for that. I don't know if they will. I think it depends on how well this DLC does, but I'm genuinely tempted to buy the season pass. And I rarely do that. Like, I'm not a big DLC guy. Like I say, when I'm done, I'm done. But no, I'm really, really excited to see what they do with it.
So I have a question. What did you think about the game's like humor and writing? I've heard, let me just be blunt and say I've heard mixed things about it. Like some people are just put off.
I like how you said you're going to be blunt, but then you still like temper it with like, mixed.
Yeah, but it's just, I've heard people call it like Family Guy humor or whatever.
There's so many examples where, yeah, there are some bad jokes. There are some like genuinely cringe moments that you go like, oh god. But I think it balances it quite well by the end with like how much you actually care about Fenyx and their story. Like, and the gods are all really interesting as well, and they're just taken to a comic level. Like, if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know they all kind of suck, and it's just taken to the nth degree here. It didn't bug me that much. Like, some of the jokes are actually really clever. I've talked about it before, but there's the one about the origin of Aphrodite that's really cleverly done. And there's just little stuff like that sprinkled all over. If you can just ignore like the occasional, like weird. There's one that really bugged me a while ago when I was playing it, but like some of the references are like modern and just doesn't vibe well. But my general takeaway
it seems like you like the humor that was more sort of rooted in Greek mythology in some way, rather than like a modern, like you said, like reference or meme or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think honestly, I'm not a massive fan of Assassin's Creed. Like, I can definitely appreciate what some people say in it, but I personally don't like it that much now. I would love for them to sort of do like I've said, like an Immortals, but for different time periods, different mythologies. Like, that is more interesting to me, even with some cringe jokes and puzzles. That is more interesting than what Assassin's Creed does, and that's like a really blanket statement. Like, I'm not speaking for anyone else. That's just me, but I would always prefer something like a bit more original, a bit more wacky, as I say in my review. But yeah, no, go play Immortals. It's great. Like, Brian, don't hedge on it. It's good. I promise.
I wonder if like if they were to release like a follow-up or sequel to this, I wonder if like that commentary on mythology or just like that, Smash TV-esque like commentary over the story and gameplay and whatnot. I wonder if that's that they see it as that's part of the identity of this Immortals.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, because
IP.
In the case of Fenyx Rising, it's Prometheus telling a story which fits with Greek mythology. I'm sure they'd find other ways of doing it, but I really enjoyed that because it just makes little things like sometimes you'll go to a new location and otherwise it'd be just a little puzzle. But sometimes they make a comment, they'll be like, "Oh, here's this Greek mythological figure. Here's a funny joke about it." Not so funny sometimes. It's just interesting.
Once you finish the game, like how this is going to sound really stupid, but how Ubisoft does it feel? Like, is it like there's a giant map and 1,000 checklists, or is it a little bit more railroaded?
It's somewhere in the middle. There are some very Ubisoft things, like there's an in-game store where you can use a currency that you pay real money for. There are some daily and weekly challenges that's just so
dailies and weeklies.
I don't get it. Like, I guess it's just extra content, but whenever I see it, I'm just like, don't put this in there. And then there's stuff like this DLC for outfits. It just feels very like.
I'm just going to say something really quick. Dailies and weeklies and crap like that is the main reason why I'm never going to have the Platinum Trophy for Rayman Legends, even though I got it for Rayman Origins.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I love Legends. But that's the thing. Ubisoft just like to interfere. They like to have their online aspects. It's not too invasive. It's kind of annoying sometimes, but you don't have to do it. A lot of the time, I just accidentally do them and then just reap the rewards. But in terms of like stuff on the map, there's all the vaults. There's some optional bosses. There's these little.
That map is littered with icons, though. Like when you properly open it, it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, I found it okay compared to something like Ubisoft, and I always say like if a game's too big, I'm not interested. So take it from anyone that it's not too stuffed.
Okay, they've actually like maybe they've put in enough that has originally intrigued people about open worlds without it feeling like a chore or something that's just endless.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, as well as that, like it helps that the world is just so gorgeous. Like I don't know why you don't like the style as much, Brian. I think it looks fantastic. Like the models.
I pulled up the Uplay Store page and I was ready to buy, and then I saw two things back to back that immediately made me like close that app on my computer. Mm-hmm. I saw the like spend $20 for 2,000 gem crystal or whatever they are. Like what? And then I saw like the trailer, and I just don't like how it looks. Irrationally so.
It's the one where Prometheus is like make it more epic. You know, like he's trying to do like the movie trailer thing. I saw that, and that nearly put me off. Like it's just
oh yeah,
lucky that-
not the very first ship, like when it was still like gods and monsters. It was like the one after that when they revealed that like was it
yeah,
3
yeah.
or like
It was
like
so bad.
yeah, that initial trailer for the game, and it was titled Immortals. That
I,
was
f-
that was very bad.
I feel like it's been a rocky road for Immortals. Like first being gods and monsters, and then sometimes it comes off as very cringe. But I think overall the reception has been pretty good. Like
Yeah, I think word of mouth has been okay for that game.
I'm excited for the future of it. I hope it gets a future. I hope it isn't just relegated to DLC. Or well, maybe the DLC is gonna be great. I probably will check it out. But I'm fully recommending it to everyone to give it a go.
And then one final thought, like I really am glad that you decided to write this, even though you there's always kind of this, I don't want to say issue, but this pervading undertone in games media where it's like, oh, its time has passed. We can't talk about that anymore. So I'm glad that we still have an avenue where you can put it up on the website, talk about it here. Because when I look back at like my Wasteland 3 review, and I wrote that a couple months late, and I didn't feel it at the time. But when I reread that review of mine, I was like, man, I'm really proud of this. I thought I did a good job here. When I read some of my review where I was pushed up against an embargo, I'm like, man, if I had time, I would have smithed this a bit differently. So I don't know if you
I
felt
completely
the same
agree.
way.
Yeah, I'm. It's one of those reviews I was really excited to get out there just because I read through it. I was like, I feel like I'm, saying some interesting things about it, and I'm being given the space to breathe with it. It's just kind of a shame because I feel like whatever review I write next, I'm like, oh god, deadlines. But
Yep.
it's fun to do something different.
Welcome back to the grind. Speaking of meeting an embargo. Oh yeah, everyone clap. All right, another review that just went up yesterday, I believe. A pretty major one for the website. We have a review from Josh Torres for Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. And you,
Yep.
I don't think you've really had a chance to talk about this on the podcast due to not being here or embargoes or whatever.
Yeah,
So-
like last weekend, I was just going at it because the code didn't came in a little bit late-ish because of stuff. Yeah, but yeah. So I was grinding away on it last weekend. That's why I wasn't here. This is East 8 is a tough act to follow because I really liked East 8. A lot of people really liked East 8. It really was one of those games that was like, whoa, this is kind of like the next step up from for the East series. And but for better or worse, they Falcom leaned more into hey, every NPC matters now. Like they all have a story arc, and it's leaning more to the Trails series type of narrative and approach. But for some reason, East 9 is a really good game. I really enjoyed my time with it. I like that it's it takes place. I don't know how much time or how many years after East 8. It definitely takes place after it. So
takes place after East 7.
Yeah,
actually.
I was actually going to say
East
that technically
7? Okay.
doesn't it go 8, 7, 9
8, 7, then
chronologically?
9. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Actually, it goes 5, 8, 6, 7, 9 because Adol has the penultimate sword from East 5 at the very beginning.
Yeah,
of East 8.
East 8. Yeah, I remember that.
Before it falls off the boat or whatever. I don't remember.
So
it's actually funny because when you get the ultimate sword in East 9, because there's always an ultimate sword in East, one of the dialogue options is, I wonder if I'm going to lose this one too.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, so the story setup of East 9 is Adol and Adogi reach this prison city of Balduk. And so when you hit start, Adol's making a prison escape, and you're just like, what the hell's going on? So he's making this prison escape, and along the way, this is in the first 2 to 3 minutes of the game, there's this hooded figure, this mysterious young woman with a hood, and she's like, sorry for what I'm about to do to you, but we all kind of need you, and shoots him with this magical gun, and this bullet that goes through him transforms him into a superhero-esque identity known as the Crimson King, and which now he's a monstrum. That's the label they gives these kind of superhero-esque forms and whatnot. And so and then it does like the flashback thing of like, oh, how the hell did Adol get here? And there's a really kind of funny tongue-in-cheek setup about this of Adol and Dogi try to enter Balduk, and then right away Adol like is arrested. And it's like, the hell, why is Adol getting arrested? So apparently, like the Romans are back. So Ram is involved in this story, like in other and whatnot. And Adol by this point in time is kind of like an infamous adventurer. Like people around the continent have heard about the tales of Adol, and like, however, if he's mixed up into something like something weird or something or a catastrophe will happen and whatnot. So he's basically being arrested for his adventures. It's like, so like early on, as he's getting interrogated in this prison, like there's this the interrogator Ingrid, her name was. There's a lot of like little funny like references to like past games, just in dialogue, passing dialogue during this interrogation, like, oh, what happened to this place? What happened in Altago? What happened in the Isle of Saren? Just all these past places that.
My favorite one is the mention about how he always crashes his boat, and he said, and there's a dialogue choice saying that happens all the time.
Yep, yeah. She mentions the shipwreck. She's like, it's very curious how you always come into possession of these like powerful artifacts and swords, and then somehow lose them. And Adol's like, yep, and whatnot. So he's serving time there, and then
it reminds me of that one quote. I know writers that use subtext, and they're all cowards.
Yeah. So the things happen and whatnot. So he's on the run, and one of the weird things about this East game is since Adol is on the run from the law, the people in Balduk, obviously you recognize Adol right away by his hair, by his red crimson hair and whatnot. So he's like, well, I can't. This can't fly. So as he's on the run, he comes across this blue dye. So Adol is basically blue-haired in this game for when he's not his monstrum form, because he can interchangeably like switch between being regular Adol or the Crimson King and whatnot. So much like East 8, in East 8, you end up on this like cursed island. Castaway village. You recruit like people, you find survivors on the island and whatnot, and then you recruit them to that village. There's a similar mechanic here in East 9 where you establish your base of operations in this dandelion bar in Balduk. The reason that Adol is kind of stuck in Balduk is because the curse that Aprilis, the hooded young woman, put on him makes it so that he can transform into this monstrum form, but as a result he can't leave Balduk. Like every time you try to leave Balduk, there's always this like barrier that doesn't allow you to leave. So it's like, okay, so the story setup is, how do I get rid of this curse on me? And obviously there's a lot more to Balduk that meets the eye. There's a lot of mysteries around it, so clearly something is going on with this city, and I need to find out first how to leave the city, but before that I want to know what's going on in the city. So throughout like the first like bunch of chapters, it kind of has this ongoing like cycle of like trying to unlock sections of the city, because very early on, like not only can you not leave the city, like each like district or part of the city that you're in is gated off. And there are other people like you who suffer a similar curse where they're monstrums, so they can't leave and whatnot. So as like a chapter begins, for example, like you'll unlock like a portion of the city, and how you do this is like there's this Nox meter, this like weird Nox meter, like always at the like top left hand corner and whatnot, and you're going like either completing side quests or like duking it out with like monsters around the city. And like the monsters aren't like can't be seen by normal people. They reside in like these like weird reality rifts. They're kind of like black holes or rifts around the city that normal people can't see, but only monstrums can see. So you
like
kind
Persona.
of yeah.
The early RPG.
Thanks, George. um, so you as you know, as you're running around city, you approach one of these, and then like a battle will start and whatnot. Like you're just kind of duking out in the middle of the city, and people are just like walking by, like whatever, you can't see anything. And,
actually, they're paused, then they're not moving when you're battling.
oh, sorry, yeah, they're like frozen in time. And so as you're like charging this like Nox meter and whatnot, you're trying to get it to 100, and then once you get it to 100, it'll like open like this like an orbish thing with like tentacles sticking out of this orb will appear at like in front of like one of these barriers, and so you
I don't know what it's called in English, but I know in Japanese it was basically called like a seed or something.
Yeah, I forgot what it was called, but it's like a portal to a thing called like the Grimwald Nox. So you're like, okay, you initiate this, and you're plunged into those. If you guys have played East 8, like there are these like raid battles in it where you defend the village through this tower defense thing from incoming monsters. So that mechanic is back in East 9, but it's like comes back more of in a full force, more story relevant. So you go into this Grimwald Nox, and you're plunged into this tower defense battle where you can there's like monster portals all around. The waves are coming in, and then it's up to you and your party to like fend them off after wave and whatnot. And just like in East 8, you have like these structures that you can like build and level up, so they can help you out, like decoys, debuff zones, and whatnot. But the nice thing about how it's done this time around, because I know in East 8 I was like fed up with like how they did it, because they were all stretched out, they dragged on a bit too long, it wasn't really that interesting. In this one, like the way that they populate the map, it's much more condensed and enclosed, so everything is kind of near each other, and so it doesn't take as long. And sometimes like there will be like ambushes from behind the structure that you need to protect, so it kind of keeps you on your toes as well. It's like, oh man, I need to go like straight back right away to the thing I have to defend and whatnot. So
I feel like one thing that you haven't really touched on, I think, is the most interesting aspect of it, is that in the like village defenses in East 8, you just had your immediate party members fighting with you. But from the very beginning in East 9, you have all of the monstrums fighting on the screen at once, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, I mentioned that in my review, that like that's the really cool thing about, at least for as much as like the tower defense battles are like kind of whatever in East 8, and in East 9 it feels more lively, because as you said, your entire party is always with you. Everyone's like, every time you enter a Grimwald Nox, they're all kind of forced in with you, because that's part of the curse. It's like, oh, well, it's kind of like showing up to work. It's like, oh, well, here we are again. Whether we want to be or not, it's we're here and you have to do this. So that's like a big thing about it. And there's also a variation of this Grimwald Nox where you break crystals all around the map. So it's a little break from the tower defense stuff as well. So after like you do these parts, you unlock that portion of the city and whatnot, and then you kind of go into this cycle for a good chunk of chapters where you start a chapter, you do some side quests, fight some battles to open these portals, so you unlock that portion of the city. Then you'll meet like your next 2B party member, because a good chunk of East 9 is about like meeting the other monstrums, and like as part of that you'll learn of their real identities along with them. So a lot of the mystery is not only just what's happening to see, but like who are the people with you, who are the like who's actually helping you out and whatnot. And I really 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 like how Falcom approached the characters in East 9. They're all really interesting, and they all have like pretty cool backgrounds, because most of them are like kind of always been in Balduke, like residents of Balduke, so they all have like pre-established like relationships, pre-established like histories of the place, so you kind of get to see what's going on in their lives, their perspective, the whole thing of their whole situation and whatnot. And everyone has like something different to add to the equation, and they all come from different walks of life, some like different parts of society and whatnot.
That's good to hear, because I feel like one of the weakest elements of East games up to 9 has been like the party members are just sort of there, with the exception of like Donna in East 8, which the story is clearly hers. Like Salsetta, East 7, and even most of the characters in East 8, like the party members, they're not really that interesting characters, like the Fisher guy whose name I forget, or Hummel, or
I feel like Rakota has a bit more of an interesting
a little bit,
because
sort of the same reason that Josh was just mentioning, that she's sort of tied to the setting in a way, and that inherently made her more interesting. And Donna, obviously, very much so, but it was a bit thin still. So that's good to hear that the party members that you get here, they sound interesting. They seem to have like a purpose in terms of how they tie into this location, the setting, and the story, more so than just being like along for the ride.
Completely random, but one thing I love about Raging Bull, for example, is that each of the party members comes with a gift that lets you do certain things. Like Adol's is like the
grappling
Crimson,
hook,
Crimson Line, which lets you like grapple onto like portions of the like pillars and stuff in the world, which have like a kind of diamond outline to it. You'll know it when you see it. Then you have like obviously White Cat has Heaven's Run, which lets you literally run up a vertical wall. Raging Bull, whenever you activate one of the Monstrum gifts that isn't her, she'll completely butcher the name unless it's her gift, and then she absolutely remembers what it's called.
Oh yeah, that's a really
just
good
fun character quirk.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Everyone like is like.
I feel like I should say, like, if you've been listening to Tetracast for a while, then you already know. But I played 3 to 9 in Japanese. I did our import review, so I haven't played the Western version. I'm just kind of piping in because I do have experience with the game.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like, I never found like any of them really that annoying either. Like, I know some like past party members kind of got on my nerves, but everyone here was pretty like well balanced. I feel they kind of. They all work with each other really well, and I distinctly remember when James was showing off East 9, like the Japanese version. Like he was very surprised at like how he felt restricted on how much he can show, because he said even if I pop in the main menu, it'll be a spoiler, because as you pop in the main menu in this game, like it'll show just basically like the real names of the monstrums with you and whatnot, and like it sounds weird to anyone who hasn't played this, but it is. Some of them are like legitimately like big spoilers too, of like just like knowing their name. It's like it's so weird to think about, but it totally works. It's like it's one of those things. It's like I really want to know who this person is, essentially. And when you get there, it's like, oh, interesting. That's kind of cool. Like where this person comes from and whatnot.
I would also. Sorry to just butt in, Josh, just because I've suddenly remembered. I've actually now played the demo for East 9. I have never played any other game in the series, but at the pushing of Cullen and you, Josh, I decided to give it a go. It's a demo, why not? I'm really into it. Like, I think it's really good fun. And this is going to seem really bizarre and random, but the gameplay reminds me a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan. I never did. It's bizarre, but just the movement and then the skills tied to holding down one button, then pressing another, and they're all on like a timeout. Like it's better than Mutants in Manhattan.
Yeah, it feels responsive. Like as you're like, yeah.
I have no idea.
If you write for another site about this game, I want to see this comparison, like in the forefront, like better. East 9 better than Mutants in Manhattan.
So I know you mentioned this in your review, Josh, but yeah. First of all, I love East 8's combat gameplay, especially. I played the game on Nightmare, and it's just like one of those fun, challenging, intense games. Does East 9's gameplay change things up to any significant degree compared to 8? I think you mentioned it uses like those traversal abilities in battle a little bit. Is that
a little
the
bit?
Case?
Yeah. So a lot of the gameplay is very identical to East 8. You have your basic attack button. You can set up to 4 skills in battle, and then you hold down R1, and it'll coincide with one of the face buttons that pop-off skills. You level them up, like the more you use them, so they use less skill points to pop off and whatnot. And as you complete like quests and whatnot, you'll get like these elixirs to expand your SP bar. A lot of that stuff is very identical to Ys 8. The one like major change that here is, since we were talking about it earlier, the Crimson King special gift is the Crimson Line. So it basically has the ability to either like traversal, like grapple instantly onto points or onto enemies. So you like target an enemy, you hit that button, and then it'll immediately extend that hit, like his gift out, and you'll immediately like warp over to that enemy that you targeted. So moving around is very
narrow from Devil May Cry.
Yeah, it's very fast to like approach enemies now. So like you no longer have to like run over to them if they're like out of reach for an ability. You just Crimson Line over to them. And this was a thing in Ys 8 as well, with like a monstrum gift, like the Raging Bull's Valkyrie Hammer. It functions a lot like the charge attack in Ys 8, where you just hold down the button and then you break through defenses, and you'll gain a lot of SP back once that hits. So you'll get it later on in that, but that's like tied to an ability. Other than that, it's not like crazy different from Ys 8, but I think that's a good thing because I really like Ys 8's combat. Like, really,
I as someone who wasn't big on, I know it's like a console game versus handheld games, but I wasn't big on like Celceta or 7. And I was just kind of like, man, I don't really like the party East. Bring back Oath and Volgana, But I really liked 8. So if 9 is sort of just more of that, like, you know what? I'm fine with that for now.
Yeah, and the flash move and flash guard are back, and I know people can be divisive about that at times. It's still back. It's identical to how Ys 8 handles it and whatnot. So I mean, to me, it doesn't really bother me that much because I enjoy that system.
And the way the meter works this time is closer to like Ys Origins meter, where it's like a boost mode, and then you can pop it again to do your special attack. So
Right.
It's not just you instantly have a special attack. It's like you pop it, can use it for a bit, and then like right before it runs out, be like, aha, it's time to let loose.
Yeah. So as James said, like like there's a separate meter to go into boost mode, and then you can that meter will constantly drain, as the longer it goes on, but you can like end it at any time with a big extra ultimate attack and whatnot. The one big improvement, I mean, this is like the thing about the game for the most part, is just traversing around Balduke. Since you're kind of trapped within the city, there's you need to have a very interesting like traversal mechanic, because you'll be going around that city a lot. So like with White Cat's ability, being able to like run up walls, with the Hawk's ability, you can glide around, and then of course with the Crimson King, you can grapple. There's a lot of very interesting like movement mechanics you can do around the city, and the way they built up the city of Balduke is like really interesting. There's like a lot of like neat landmarks, like you can go on top of like this like chapel area. You can see like this Colosseum area. You can go to this other district that's like run by the nobles, and where the nobles reside. So there's always something to see around the city and exploring around it. And the way you move around it is like, it's up to you how you want to, what's most comfortable to you. Some people will just would rather run around the streets, but other people will just like, I'm gonna go grapple to this high area, and then I want to go glide down there after running up it. And then as I'm gliding, I'll go straight into like a grapple to get into this place and whatnot. And just the way you kind of move around feels fluid, and the verticality of the environments makes it so like there's always something to see both at top, and sometimes there's like things to see at the bottom, like an underground waterway. Like like this quest NPC, you can't find it. It's like, oh, it's because they're like at this underground waterway by like a canal.
And there's a lot of reasons to explore too. And I'll just say this because I'm sure George is going to ask it. Yes, Balduke itself is basically open world. So there's stuff like the petals, the blue or azure.
Azure petals. There's you can like there's this NPC that that rewards you for there's different NPCs for rewarding you on collectibles, like how much of the map you explored, how many azure petals you explored. There's also a cool mechanic, or collectible rather, where there's graffiti all around Balduke, and every one of these like graffiti pieces have like a little like passage on them or a little comment on them to kind of flesh out either like just a tad bit about like the people who live in Balduke, or maybe even the lore of Balduke a little bit. And some of them will even result into battles because the one who wrote the graffiti was like not in the right state of mind, so they might just have a spontaneous battle.
Josh, I just realized something.
What's
It's literally Roman shit posting.
God, it's true, and you're not wrong. So that's like there's compelling reasons to like move around the map and like find these collectibles. Obviously, there's chests all around the map as well. And to build off your point, James, of like how it feels like an open world. I think that's what helps. It feels great to move around Baldur because you're not constantly like shifting like into different zones there's not like a separate zone area to like get to the noble district and whatnot. You just go fly on over there if it's like open to you and whatnot. Like I remember in East 8, one of my big one of the big things that really bothered me about it, and it's probably because it was built for the Vita initially, was that the Isle of Seiren, the island that you're on, was very divided, very segmented. Like you go into this area, it's like, oh, I want to go back into like the area that I was previously in, but then like I remember there are even maps that bigger maps in the East 8 that was weird. It's like they're on the same map, but they're divided into a different zone in it. So you're like going to like the left side of that area, but it was divided to a separate zone. And I think that's a carry over from.
There's something interesting about that is that East 8 on Vita, like even like Castaway Village was segmented in a way that like they even went back to it on PS4 and were like, well, we don't really need it to be segmented anymore, and so they kind of made it so it was like one big zone except for like the cave. So
yeah. So so it feels really, really good now to just not have to deal with that. Obviously, there are still like some weird zoning areas, like when you're like going down a staircase at like this small part of the city that like you can normally go down it like just like if you glide down there to that area, but like if you want to access it like through just going down a stairs that leads to that area, that's like has like a zone, like a dotted zone thing that like you phase into. So it's just like a weird design decision, but it's not a big deal. Another thing that really stuck out to me in East 9 was like the side quests are some of the best in the series, in my opinion. I really like how like just most of the side quests like exist to like fulfill either like the lore or the environment, or to like recruit people into like your dandelion bar. And there are like, interesting ways of like how they find to justify that through the side quest. And as I mentioned in my review, like there's this like some particular side quest chains that really surprised me that they were optional side quests because
they feel like they should have been part of the main narrative.
Yeah. Because some of these side quest chains like really serve to like get the big picture of like what's going on.
Josh and I are being vague about it because it is kind of spoilery, and that's also the reason why we think it probably should have been main narrative. Like that's something that I commented on in my import review as well, because it's like, man, this is really cool. Why is this side quest?
And this is a game also where you can permanently miss side quests. Luckily, those ones that like are like kind of enrich the main narrative in a vital way they're hard to miss in the way that the game's structured and how the game.
Also, what's really nice is that even unlisted side quests show up on the map for Balduke. So if you're looking at the map, you'll see like little icons letting you know that there's a side quest there, and that's really helpful.
Yeah,
I don't think it's really that hard to go for 100% completion if you're like regularly checking the map, and even then, it's not like side quests like expire super quickly. Anyways, it's not like Ease 8. I feel like where there was like a side quest with the one noble dude that wanted you to get the specific like food, and as soon as you get the recipe for it, like if you don't do it immediately, he basically just disappears. I
mean I missed like 2 side quests in my playthrough because I just wasn't.
You were rushing for a review too, in a way.
Yeah, in a way, also, yeah. But like those like marked hidden quests on the maps, like sometimes it's easy to miss them. Like if you haven't uncovered that area of the map, Like some it was easy to tell right away, but there were just some that like I just forgot to check the map at certain points. It's like, oh, whatever. So, but most of the side quests will show up on the bulletin board by the Dandelion Bar, and I think.
Oh, actually, that reminds me. The game even tells you when new quests get added to the bulletin board too.
I don't remember if they. Oh yeah, it'll tell you if it gets added to the bulletin board, but not hidden quests.
Yeah.
Hidden quests you never get notified by them until like you only know you missed a hidden quest is when you go to the next chapter and you look at your journal and just like, oh, what's this new quest entry? Failed. Okay, cool. Well, it was nice knowing that then. The first time that happened, I'm like, oh. I think one of the big things that people will have to learn to overcome with East 9, I grew to appreciate it, but I know a lot of people will be. It might be a divisive thing. Is like with most East games, especially with East 8, for a lot of people, like a lot of people really like the vibrant color palette of it. And you're in this island, it's very bright. Everything is very. There's a lot of saturation of color, so it's very rich.
Lots of blues and greens, right?
Yes, yeah. And in East 9, it's very drab, dreary. It's a lot of muted colors, a lot of grays. It can get a little bit foggy at times. It feels like kind of just lifeless in a sense. But as the story went on and developments throughout, like I started to really enjoy and soak in the environment and atmosphere of that game. There's to me, not a lot of games like really get to do that kind of like setting in games in fear of like it might get boring to people. It always has to look lively. To me, I really like the. Is it
selling the setting?
Yeah, so. I think so because you're stuck in this like prison city. Like there's an oppressive premise to it. Like inherently, there are still like great like heartwarming moments between characters, but by and whole, it's the situation that Adol and Dogi find themselves in, and all the characters that like are relevant to it. It's like it's not a great. There's not like a ton to be super happy about, and like, yeah, let's go again. It's like, well, we're kind of stuck in this situation. Let's try to make the most of it. And I really like that. I really like that about the game. That's like kind of
what I want to say is that I feel like there's a difference between being drab and dreary and being like grainy and kind of like uninspired in some areas. Like the one thing that stood out to me with East 9 that I really wish it was a little bit better about is I can understand the difference in art style, but I felt like the fields that you eventually explore aren't nearly as interesting as some of the ones in like East 8. Like you never get like one of those instances like coming down from Jen's Dom or however you pronounce it, which is really striking in East 9. Like none of the fields are like that. And I understand that's partially because the game itself is supposed to be focused around the city, but if you're gonna have the fields, I feel like
I wouldn't want the cities to be as vibrant as you say it in this game. It would feel totally wrong.
I didn't mean like the vibrant. I don't necessarily mean the vibrancy. I just mean like the art style is one thing, but I feel like I don't know the game itself. Yes, it's drab and dreary, but I feel like some of the locations are boring in the sense that I don't think they necessarily needed to be, because there's games like Dark Souls that have drab and dreary environments that are still interesting to look at.
Dark Souls is a weird one because like that, like it's not really drab and dreary the way they contextualizes it and how the lighting engine in that game works. Like it's supposed to be, but it's really not in a weird way for that game. In this game, like to me, like there were some like kind of environments, but for the most part, I really dug that like where it took you in especially later in the game. And that I'm just like talking around it at this point. It's hard to really explain without getting down.
I'll just be blunt with how good the final dungeon looks and how interesting it is. I'm disappointed that the rest of the game was so uninteresting to me.
Yeah, well, I feel a little bit differently, but I'm kind of interested to see like where like different people will fall on that because it's like I said, it's a very different kind of East game, and I really like that they kind of went out. It's like, hey, we're not just gonna make another one of these. We're really gonna take it into a different direction, like the way it handles like the flow of story and narrative in that game. It's very,
the story in East 9 is really interesting, and I'm really glad that what was my hot take from people that played the Japanese version seems to be the presiding opinion that Ys 9's story is better than Ys 8's.
I think so too, for sure. Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not really a huge fan of Ys 8's story. Like, I love Ys 8, and I like Donna as a character, but like the actual story part of it kind of feels done before to me, and its way it's presented is really kind of awkward. I was somewhat concerned when I heard that Ys 9 puts a little bit more focus on like a narrative through front, but it sounds like it does a pretty good job. And it sounds like some of my higher concerns that I was sort of concerned that it would be like full of references to the previous games. Like, remember when? Well, I was afraid they're going to be like tactless and without any effort. Like, remember, this is just like when we were in the Isle of Saren. Do you remember when you did this? Oh yeah, and that's when this and this and this happened. And it's just, apparently it's not so blunt as that.
No. Adam and I were talking about it a little bit, in Snapchat. But yeah, the way they kind of surface that stuff makes sense and it flows naturally. And it's also great that, Ys America learned from last time with the Ys 8's localization, the way that launched and whatnot. The Ys 9's localization out of the gate is pretty excellent. I really like how how it reads well, it flows well. There's not the archaeological big hole incident that happened in Ys 8. And I think, I guess my final thing about this game, and we've gone over it in the review. We've reached out to Ys America over it. As I was playing this game on PS5 primarily, like I suffered a lot of crashes on PS5 for our early build of Ys 9. Not build, but like the early release of it.
And this is really, really useful because, well, obviously when I originally played Ys 9, I played it on PS4, but recently, like when I got my PS5, I did a replay of Ys 9 on PS5, the Japanese version. I didn't have any of those crashes, so we can say definitively it's an issue with the localization.
Yeah, with the local, the Western release and whatnot. So, it would happen like sporadically. It would sometimes happen in a cutscene at a specific point that could be repeated. Sometimes it would happen just like during like a cutscene where nothing's happening. Like that's what happened for me. Like my final crash of the game after I'm beating the final boss, there was like a somewhere in the final stretch of the very, very final stretch of the game. It crashed on me just when nothing was really happening on the screen, and I was like, well, it didn't auto save after the final boss fight, so I had to go re-download the game on my PS4 Pro to fight that final boss again. And then I was doing some PS4 Pro testing performance soon after I was done with the game. It would happen sometimes when I was like just leaving the dandelion bar. Sometimes it would just crash after taking like 4 or 5 steps out of there. So it's one of those things that's like at some even like during a side quest, like there were like certain parts of the side quest where it was just like I got like 3 crashes there like consistently at different points of that side quest. It was one of those things like, oh man, this.
Hopefully this becomes just a footnote. Like, oh yeah, right. It was messy at launch, and now no one it's fixed and it's
So NIS America has a history of like poor QA and like issues with games having crashes. I know like it was infamous, especially on PS3, where like some of the Skya games, like if you used fire like spells, they would overheat the PS3, which was like kind of ironic. And then there was stuff like Witch and the 100 Knight on PS3 had like horrific crashing issues.
Oh yeah, I remember.
So NISA has a history with this, but I feel like this specific instance with Ys 9 on PS5 is maybe a little bit less of their fault, because a little bit of inside baseball, but like NISA was waiting on Sony to get them retail code to send out to reviewers for weeks before we actually got any. And I doubt that NIS America have a PS5 dev kit yet, which means that they would have had to wait it for retail code in order to test on PS5 if they even have any. So
they probably literally could not test it on PS5, like literally unable to. Like they could not do it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like just for full transparency, we've been exchanging emails with them here and there, just kind of helping them out, like just like, hey, this is where we noticed that like it's crashing consistently here and whatnot. Because like what we want is like for the best experience for everyone who plays this game, right? Whether it's good or bad, we just like whether it's a good game or a bad game, a game should like never suffer like fatal crashes like this for anyone.
Yeah. It should have been better, but I feel like at least in this instance, not
I think the blame is spread.
Yeah.
It's like we're not going to point fingers at anyone here. Like just the kind of the reality that we live in at the moment. It makes it difficult, right? So let's just NIS America has already responded to us since like hours after the review went up, like saying, all right, yeah, we're like before when I was going through the game, saying we're currently investigating it, but then we didn't really hear back until yesterday. We were like, hey, we have a patch incoming. It'll release soon, hoping to address these fixes and whatnot. Like, okay, cool. Like, hopefully, that'll come out either before like launch or very, very, very like shortly after it launches. So like the amount of like people who suffer it is very minimal and whatnot. I'm just doing my due diligence. It's like reviewing the games. Like, this is my experience with the game. This is what I suffered and whatnot. This is just letting people get informed about it, and from there, and hopefully we can help people make an informed decision, and at the same time, hopefully inform the people who are in charge of who are distributing the game, saying, hey, do you have anything for us to help ensure people that they'll get the best experiences possible without any sort of issues or hiccups like this and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I'm really, 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 really excited for more people to play this game and to talk about. There's a lot to talk about this game, but it's hard. It's very difficult to talk about this game without spoiling it out, right? Because there's a lot of like it's surprising for a Ys game that like you go into this and it's like, wow, I really don't want to spoil like the narrative and the story of this Ys game, because the things that happen in it and the way things are presented in it, it's like it's very shocking. It's very surprising. I'm really glad that I'm really glad that like Qualcomm took a Ys game in this direction, and also I'm really glad that they condensed the overall length of the game. I know in Ys 8 it's a great game, but to me it felt like the hour count on it just like kind of dragged on. Like you got a lot of hours out of Ys 8, but a lot of it was like it kind of dragged its feet at points, despite its enjoyable gameplay. With Ys 9, still very enjoyable, but they were able to like condense it in very smart ways, so like it doesn't feel like anything. There's never really any like quote unquote downtime in how you're actually progressing it. Like interesting things are constantly happening in Ys 9.
And it's really nice to replay too, because if you're fine with just skipping the cutscenes, you can get it done like 10 hours or less. So that's nice.
So I've been pretty quiet as you guys have been talking over this, just because like it's been really I've just been content just sitting here listening to you three discuss it. We have obviously James, who has played through this game a while back, and then Josh, who has played through it recently, and then Adam, who has a lot of affinity to the series, and then even George chimed in. So I feel kind of like the outsider a bit. I have played some Ys games, but I guess they've always been kind of fire and forget for me. Like I play through them and I don't really think about them that much, which is it's not really like a negative feeling. I enjoyed what I played. I guess I just don't really adhere to them as strongly.
That's fine. Like I think these games are really cool, just like as like gameplay experiences too. It's like, I just want to like play like a really fast action RPG. Like even if you don't care about the story, that's still fine. It's a fine.
That's how most Ys games are, really. Like, I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, Felghana is like a really great pick up and play game. It's really cool. It's really fun. It's got great music, great style.
Like 15 hours long.
It doesn't really like, but it is over in like 10, 15 hours. So it's not like something that you played for weeks at a time and really sticks with you, I guess. But they're still great games.
Yeah.
So,
and I was always of the mindset that like the party based Ys games, there's a certain, I don't know, old school mindset where it's like the solo idle Ys, like Ys 1 through 6 before Celceta and 7. Like those are the only ones that matter. Everything else is garbage. People like to dial it up to 11 and 12 just to get a response. And I was kind of like, I don't like the party games as much, but I did enjoy Ys 8 quite, even though Ys 8 was one of those games where even though I have like, I could probably list out a bunch of things that I didn't like about it, but the whole package I still really enjoyed. Like everything that I list about, I don't like the characters. I don't like or I don't like a certain character, I don't like a certain story beat. I think the idea of like this eternal recurrence, resetting of the world or whatever it's been in Mass Effect, it's been in Xenosaga, it's been in so many different places that it has to do it like really well for me to be interested in that general thread of narrative. And so, but then I think back on it and like, you know what, I really did enjoy it quite a fair bit. So I really should be excited about East 9, and I will probably play it when it comes to PC, hopefully not too long after this release just now.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Adam said, a lot of times I just want to like, I really do. I'm the sort of person that a game has to have some skill-based element to it. And obviously East games, if you bump up the difficulty, have that in spades. So,
oh yeah, I guess now that you mentioned it, like right out of the gate, this game has like 6 difficulty levels. It has easy, normal, hard, nightmare, inferno, and lunatic. So there you go. Make it as hard as or as easy as you want.
I like how when you get to I like how when you get to hard mode as like the 3rd easiest difficulty, like how do we tier this up? Inferno, lunatic. But I have no doubt that I will enjoy this game, but I kind of enjoy it in a very specific way.
I'm very interested to see like how we're all 3 of you, Adam, you, and George, like fall in this game once you guys get your hands on it. I know George is already like gonna start it soon. And I really, I want to talk about these characters so much. They're great. They're awesome. I really like just like how Falcom really nailed it with this.
I want to see a thesis about how this is similar and different to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Manhattan or whatever.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try.
Look, in my head, I know who the Donatello is in this game, but I want to see who you
think it
land
is.
on.
We did have. I don't want to move the boat too quickly. Are we? Final thoughts on East 9?
East 9. It's another excellent entry in the East series. I really, really enjoyed it. I love it.
And hopefully the crashing issues are a footnote, like Adam said.
Yeah,
not too long.
I think the only big like things that really bothered me about it is obviously the crashing issues. That sucked. Like in 33 hours of my gameplay, I suffered at least in my head. I stopped counting after 10, so I'm saying at least 10. It's probably more around like 15 or 16, probably. But also just as you play through it and as you play through the chapters, like I was mentioning earlier, it does get a bit formulaic and like how you know exactly how a chapter is generally going to play out in terms of like what you're going to be doing in it. And I wish there was more variety in how the chapters flowed and what happened to.
Yeah, it did sound a little bit video gamey, where it's like you enter a new area and you'll get exactly one new party member in this chapter, sort of thing. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, and like they have to kind of like fit the story into that mold and like kind of adhere to it and whatnot. It's like it's one of those. It's like it's it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's definitely something.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I really.
We did have one other review that went up, and we probably won't spend a ton of time on this because I do think that James has talked about it at length last week. But he did formalize his published review for Utawarerumono, Prelude to the Fallen, coming out on Steam. So I don't know if you just had any final thoughts as you wrapped up writing down probably what you'd already verbalized last week.
Yeah, basically everything I said last week is all I really had to say.
But it's like if I wanted to play this game, this is the only way I can now, right? Unless I track down a physical disc.
Yeah, unless you wanted to track down a physical disc or cart for the Vita or PS4 version. Well, no, I mean, it's still up digitally for the first game. So you can still get it on like PS4 Vita for the first game. But if you're going to play it in the interest of playing the rest of the series, it's much easier to get in on PC now because the whole series is available on PC, whereas Mask of Deception, Mask of Truth aren't available digitally in North America on PS4 and Vita anymore because they've been delisted. So,
and to clarify for people, like first game meaning Prelude to the Fallen, because like even though Mask of Truth or Mask of Deception, Mask of Truth came out technically first here, those are 2 and 3, not the first Utawarerumono.
Yep.
And then, so James wrote up his review, which is kind of like a report on the PC version, how it fixes a few things, etc. A little bit more technical than a typical review, but just a quick little read to see how the PC version stacks up. Seems like the answer in general is pretty good.
Hey man, like Steam is really getting good at like just completing series. You got Otawarerumono here, then they got Yakuza just recently, like 3, 4, 5 remastered.
Right, Mono. God damn it. That's an ancient anime meme.
Yeah, but then, like just recently this week, they got 3, 4, the Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 remastered finally up on the Steam as well, and then 6 is coming in March. Like these are finally getting completed. Like series are finally getting completed on Steam, just like the whole package. And their 3, 4, and 5 remastered are also up on Game Pass as well for people who are sub to that. And just wanted to say, Yakuza games pretty good in general.
And we've got even Persona 4 and Persona 5 Strikers on Steam. So before you know it, the whole series.
Oh,
Wishful
with a Persona 3 remake that has both protagonists, controllable party members, and all that. It's coming.
Yeah,
Finally,
and the same graphics as like that Persona 3 dancing game.
Yep.
And the last feature that we want to shout out is one that's not a scored review, but something that Alex Donaldson put up about Mass Effect Andromeda, the title being Mass Effect Andromeda isn't as bad as its reputation suggests. So this was kind of a contentious opinion op-ed that he put up about basically heralding the unsung qualities of Mass Effect Andromeda. I'm the sort of, I guess, to put it bluntly, I don't really agree with him, but I respect it, sort of thing. First of all, has anyone here besides me played Mass Effect Andromeda?
I remember I had every intention to buy it until I heard about it, and then it's like
I've been meaning to play it for a long time. I played the first 3, and then I just never played Andromeda. Still haven't.
I was 100% gonna get it until I started hearing how it was. Like, oh, never mind.
So my general opinion of this is that people, because the way that our social media is kind of organized in clips and GIFs and tweets and whatever, is that it is very easy, I think, to zero hyper focus on animation bugs and oddities. And when Mass Effect Andromeda came out, that was its death knell, like the facial animations, the weird rigging of the character models. That was all anyone shared for months.
There was that cutscene where like the gun model was facing the other way in a certain cutscene. That's the thing that stuck out to me. It's like, oh, like this person's like holding this gun, but the gun is facing them.
And
I remember that one. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and for me, I guess, like I notice these things, but I don't really like dwell on them to the extent that I feel like my peers do. And I don't mean like you guys. I just mean like in general, people on social media sharing in comments and interviews, especially because played Mass. Go ahead.
It's a lot harder. I think what you're getting at, and I'll let you continue, but like, it's a lot harder to show off things like the overall structure of the game, maybe like the progression from beginning to end, storylines or characters or things like that. And even if there's flaws there, it's just way easier to show like, this person's neck looks funny.
Yeah, so I played this game, I believe it was like patch 1.07 or something like that. And it was a lot of that stuff that went viral early on was already fixed. I'm like, all right, it's been polished up. I mean, is it a good game now? Long story short, I still didn't like it. But again, kind of for reasons that I felt were a little bit less superficial. Mainly, I played in 2016, 2017. I think those are the years. Dragon Age, Inquisition, and Mass Effect Andromeda. And I felt like where both of these games kind of fumbled was in their quest design, where there's kind of two different, this is diluting it down a bit, but there's kind of like two different avenues of quest design. There's the Deus Ex Mankind Divided style of quests, where there is a small number of very well made is an opinion, but very like
they're bespoke. Like
they're bespoke quests. They're the opposite of the MMO do A of B, X of Y.
They're like side stories. And I remember Mankind Divided specifically, like it was literally like there are 10 side quests and there are only 10. That is it.
Yeah, and they will flesh into the world. They will introduce new characters. They will have dialogue and voice acting. They will have unique locations. It's like the opposite of an MMO type quest. And then I feel like Dragon Quest Inquisition, Dragon Quest, you can see where my mindset is. At least I'm catching myself. Dragon Age, Inquisition, and Mass Effect Andromeda, they have like, in general, the worst quest design I've ever seen. It's very like, go to this planet, and every single planet has a hidden base underneath it where you do the ancient race of this area of the galaxy. It's not the Protheans, it's something else. I forget what it's called. And you collect a thing from each of them, and you've done 3 of 4 and 4 of 4, and each place you go, like, I just remember
Very
the top
cut and paste.
I just remember, I believe it's the top left one corner of the UI. It was constantly like number counters, like you've done X of Y, you're 90% done with this thing, and it just felt like chores upon chores upon chores. And the combat was good. The art and graphics are, I think, the best of the series, which is kind of like the default, basically, because it's the newest entry and it's built on a better engine. But it just wasn't fun to play. Like the short term, I guess. The short term, I hate this term. I hate loop. There it is. I'll spit out loop. The short term loop is good. Like the combat encounters, just fighting it's kind of like a mesh of the Mass Effect 2 and 3 style over the shoulder third person shooter with some of the RPG elements of the first game, I think, more effectively threshed in. But you're doing it. But all of that is kind of meaningless if you're doing the most boring, mundane stuff with it, where it's just like, oh, I'm going to another. I feel like I'm failing myself here because they're not Protheans. It's some other like ancient race. They just kind of retread that story beat where it's like, who was here before us and why did they vanish, sort of thing. So it just like it has those narrative fumblings. It has this quests that I didn't think were very good. But anyways,
I still need to play it.
Good.
Yeah, it does seem like one thing that people tend to be more positive on. Obviously, not everyone, but people do seem to like the combat of Andromeda, and like that seems to be what people, if they're going to praise any component of it, that seems to be most likely. So,
yeah. So, I guess I just feel like the pervading theory or the pervading dialogue around Andromeda still harkens back to those animation issues that it had early on, and I just feel like that's so like minute at this point. Like it doesn't matter. Like that's not why that's not why I dislike the game. But anyways, I feel bad just kind of digging at this game when the crux of the article was that it wasn't as bad as its reputation suggests. So
I mean, it's okay.
People are allowed to have opinions that are against the grain. I mean, I have many.
And to talk about the animation things, like first impressions are everything to a lot of people. You know, like when you play a game at launch, you want it to work. You know, and if it shows that like it shipped in like hot, you know, and like for example, my time at East 9, that like those crashing issues might not be a thing like a week or two from now when it releases, but you know, first impressions are everything. You know, and like my first playthrough of that game, that will always be the thing that sticks out for me when going through that game, because it's like, hey, I remember I really liked this game, but the thing that will stick in my mind for a good chunk, it's like that game crashed a lot when I played it, you know?
So yeah, Mass Effect Andromeda, it's still probably my least favorite game of the series. If you want to hear a more positive take on it, Alex did put up his feature about it. Even in his feature, he talks about where it still falls short. So I guess it is kind of a very like tempered. He's not trying to say that it's the best of the series, really. He's just saying that it might have been overly criticized, I suppose. So I'm not going to say whether that argument's correct or incorrect, because I don't know if you can definitively say that, but we've got it up on the website. Interesting op-ed. It's always good to see these. It's I guess, and it's an interesting opinion. It's better to be interesting and substantiate yourself rather than just try to be like, this is the correct opinion everyone can agree on, and there's absolutely no discussion to be had. So, and other than that, I think that covers all the features that we had. We had those 4 reviews.
We okay. Before we move on, like James, George, and I have to talk about this Balan Blunderworld demo before we move on.
So
okay.
Balan Blunderworld, more like Balan Blunderworld.
Okay, so the Square Enix, just this past week, released a demo for Yuji Naka's next game. Yuji Naka, obviously very famous, you know, for his work at Knights other popular stuff way back when. So this is one of those projects that like a good chunk of us has had an eye on. It's like, oh, he's making another game. Square Enix gave him a chance. He even made like this new company to make this game and named it after the game. Like the new company was like Balan Company, and they're really, it looks like they're really like aiming high for this game and looking to knock it out of the park. And we want a good like 3D platformer. That's I'm always down for good 3D platformers. Then this demo came out. All right, who wants to?
So yeah, let me just say, pretend I don't know much about this game because I don't. Just like start at the top. Like, what is the game supposed to be, and what is it actually?
So the premise of this game, from what I can understand, is there's this you either select this boy or girl to be your character. At the opening cinematic of this game is that they like enter this like wonder house of sorts, kind of like almost Charlie and the Chocolate Factory-esque. And they meet this like mysterious figure named Balan, and like it's like kind of like a not a house of horrors, but like a house of like weird things that they're.
It's like a circus.
Oh my!
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, like they're kind of being transported like different worlds, and I forgot like what these worlds are meant to represent. Because that, like, believe it or not, the thing about this game is that there is no spoken dialogue in this game, and how they're going to plan to present this story is that there's a separate novel is also planned for the release alongside this game, which will explain the story more because it has no spoken dialogue outside of the opening cutscene. I shit you not. That's what they're planning for this game.
The Final Fantasy 15 approach.
Well, we're lucky FF15 actually had a story and presented it with voices, or at least we could actually follow it. This one's like, I don't really know what. So there's like
that's weird because even like PS1 era platformers had dialogue. I mean,
yeah,
some they weren't. It wasn't voiced, obviously, but there was some.
Now, all I'm wondering is did Billy Hatcher have more of a story than I was supposed to know, and it was just not...
Oh, shit. Is there really a Billy Hatcher novel? I need to go look into that. But, okay, so there are two, like, the two first stages, I think, were in this demo. There's, like, this World 1, and then there's, like, Stage 1, Stage 2 to this world. Oh, my God. Okay, so
Number one, whoever decided that the default, or really any of the jumps in this game are okay in a 3D platformer has no business working on 3D platformers. Straight up.
Okay, so
what's the problem with jumping?
What isn't the problem with jumping? So here's the basic gameplay of the game. So the whole shtick of this game is, you find these costumes across the level. They're like hidden, like they're not even hidden. They're in plain sight. They're like contained like in these like shard chests, and there's like always a key right by them. And this key is respawnable for some reason. So like literally the first like level of the game, there's like a costume and a key right beside it. So you take this key and put it to unlock this first costume, and this costume is like kind of, I think, like a tiger-esque costume. So whenever you jump, you do a spin, and so you get that, and then the key respawns for some reason. It's like, okay, because like the other costumes across that level will still have a coinciding key, but so I don't understand why this key respawns. So you can just stack up on keys if you want to, I guess, for some reason. Now, also the gameplay is here's your controls. You use your left stick to move, right stick to move the camera. Your face buttons all do the same thing. They all jump. I think some of your trigger buttons also jump. That is the control scheme.
Well, that's just classic Sonic, where on the A, B, and C on the Genesis controller all jumped.
So yes, but also there's nothing that in the level design that really like makes you feel good about like controlling it at all. It even made me George and I woozy. You can go on, George, about like why we felt woozy about this game too, like as we played it.
When I did the first level, and I was like, this is pretty. It's okay. Like I don't see why people hate it. It's just kind of, it's sort of boring. But like some people might enjoy that. It's kind of slow. It's first level. Leave it alone. And then got to the second level, and within a minute of playing it, I was like, "Oh my god, I feel genuinely sick. I feel motion sick," because I don't know if it's going to be the case in every level, but in the second level of the game, it's sort of, I want to say it's like Mario Galaxy, but like done really badly. So like as you're going through the level, it's like the screen is curving towards the end, and it just like it's the same thing as with why the platforming feels so bad. It's hard to describe something that's like game feel and how something makes you feel. But it was just like I had to stop. I was just like, this is not worth it. This boring platformer is not worth me being sick. Like screw that, man.
Yeah, and also, so aside from just like general movement feeling bad and like your default movement is like, or really any of your movement feels slow. Like there's like not really much momentum to it. It doesn't feel responsive. So on top of all that, like kind of just being a boring.
Everything feels disjointed because I'd be fine with floatiness if that worked into the jump, because the way the jump works is that it doesn't preserve any momentum. It basically grinds to a halt. The way it works, like your jump feels like it goes half the distance it feels like it should go. And I'd be fine if it was floaty, if the jump itself was floaty and it didn't feel like you were basically just hitting a brick wall in midair.
Yeah.
So when you jump, is there like any, how do I put this? So you can either jump from like a standing still position or jump while you're running, and it sounds like if you're moving along and you click jump, your character will like stop and then jump.
No, not like that. It's just like you will move a little bit in midair, but basically
there's like
momentum feels wrong.
It just feels off. Like you think about like good jumps in video games. Like think about like a Mario jumps. You know, it feels like good to jump. You get a satisfying amount of like inertia, momentum in that jump. In this game, it just feels totally off. It just what you see and how you think you're supposed to go totally betrays like what happens when you click the jump button. It just feels off. You know. So aside from like this gimmick of like finding costumes and switching between them to do different stuff. Like the first two is like this: when you jump, you spin, and then the second one, like you hold down A, and then you kind of float in midair, and like to like cross like more longer platforming games, which is like okay, whatever. Like and the whole thing is like you have to switch between costumes to like navigate the level. So let alone aside from like the costume switching animation taking too long, it takes 2 seconds longer than it should be. It really should be instantaneous. But like you always spin around and like switch to another costume. It's like okay, that's whatever. So there's like another gameplay mechanic in it where sometimes you see these like collectibles, or not even collectibles, like items where like Balan himself or itself.
Yeah, they are.
So you get transported to this like instance, or like okay. You think that like okay, they're gonna try to do like maybe a Knights type level with like Balan, okay, and you can like move around. It's like no. What the basic idea of this like these instances is Balan is like moving to like battle this creature, but the way you interact with it is there are like silhouettes of Balan that'll like come in from off screen, and then you have to match up that silhouette that's moving very slowly to like. You have to hit the button right when it matches the pose of what Balan is doing. Or there'll be multiple like after images of Balan coming from different parts of the screen, and then you have to like mash a button as they're doing it, and then it'll give you like it's kind of like basically a QTE that feels like shit, and it's presented to you like shit because like you never really know what the timing is to like match that pose, because things are happening. Balan is doing things, and you're not really quite sure like what pose you're really supposed to like match it up with, because it's so vague. It just feels like shit.
Like, why is it there? I ran into it and I was like, it's just so weird. I don't know. I was so interested
in like you're graded like excellent, great, good, or bad. It's like a QTE rhythm game that just doesn't work at all.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I've just lost all interest in the game. Like it was gonna be one of those I probably will pick up and play through. Like I enjoy my 3D platformers, but just after this, I'm like, just not interested.
This is like the worst demo I've played for an incoming game I was interested in for in a while, dude. I was like, all right, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I don't I wonder where I'll come up on it because I heard a lot of people, by a lot of people I hear like virtually almost everyone I've known to speak about playing the demo, like they didn't have any good things to say about it. I'm like, okay, well, it's weird. I'll give it a shot. Like I don't know what's really going on, and man, I was super interested in this game, and now I'm just like, never mind, man.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning or noting that this game is supposed to release in March. Like
for $60. They're asking $60 for this game, and you played, you're like, what the fuck?
I mean, this isn't like the Bravely Default 2 demo, which was clearly like several months before release, and like wondering about feedback and like, okay, we can address these things, sort of, like almost like a beta. But this is supposed to be, a demo to drum up interest for the game releasing in just like, I don't know, like 6 weeks or something like that.
So I haven't downloaded this demo, but I am looking at some footage on it on YouTube right now that I just pulled up. And even without a controller in my hand, it looks very floaty. Like it looks like the whole game is built as if you're playing in a 3D platformer's final ice level. Like there's no traction or anything like that. Like the characters' feet are just kind of like slipping everywhere. It seems like
it's and yet somehow slower than a typical ice level in a platformer too. Ah man, but yeah, if you guys, if any of our listeners are interested, like definitely, the demo is out on all the platforms, the Switch, PS4, or Sony platforms, Xbox platforms, PC. Try it out, see if there's stuff you're interested. But man, it's tough, dude. I really wanted to like this game. It looked really good, but like the best thing I can say about this game is the opening cinematic is really, really cool and visually great. And like it's really cool that like they give you like these, I think, 4 preset appearances for both the boy and the girl, and like whatever appearance you choose for them, that's reflected in that cinematic, and that's really cool. But it feels like they blew their entire budget on that one thing, which looks really nice. But man, the rest of the game, or at least from what the demo shows, this game needs work. This game needs, and they need to figure out fast whether they should delay it or not.
I don't know. I don't even know for delay. Like, I don't think of any games that are retrievable, but I just don't think it looks good. I just don't think it plays good. It sounds sort of okay. It looks really weird.
Also, I'm just gonna ask. So, which versions of the demo did you guys play?
I played the
PS5.
Steam version.
Which one did you play, George?
The PS5 one.
Okay, the Switch version has horrible performance issues on top of everything.
Oh yeah. I think the Switch, PS4, and maybe the older Xbox One, older versions of it. Like I didn't hear great things about its performance either.
The Switch version has like, it's not just like the frame rate that's bad enough on its own. It has stuttering, like freezes, hitching, along with all of the morphing of the environments. It's not good.
Ugh.
Yep. What
happened? What happened to this game? And this is like the big thing that Yuji Naka stake to There's the one shot that Square Enix is giving him, and he named this entire company after this. I don't know, man.
I'll be honest. I didn't really have super high expectations in the first place because Billy Hatcher's an alright 3D platformer, but I don't think Yuji Naka's ever been in charge of a 3D platformer that was like objectively good.
But at least Billy Hatcher, like at least you can like play it, you can control it. Like it's like okay, like these controls are at least like they're responsive. But they're just
they work.
Yeah, they work. This game,
yeah,
I guess they work.
I feel like Yuji Naka is best when his games aren't direct platformers. Like, I really like Nights into Dreams. It's probably my favorite game of his. I really like Rodea the Sky Soldier, which isn't really a 3D platformer. It's kind of a bit different. At least the Wii version. Don't play the Wii or 3DS version. Seriously, the man himself even says the Wii version is the only one he wants people to play. But, like, those are good games. And Billy Hatcher's all right, but this is just, man, what happened? What happened?
I kind of want to play out of like morbid curiosity now, though. Like, if anything, that might help some sales. Like, I'm sure there are people out there who are like, "Yeah, this could get worse. This could
I'm
be
not
fun."
going to pay money for this game.
Is it going to be on Game Pass? If it's going to be on Game Pass, maybe.
I don't think so.
Is it worth it though? Is it worth it though?
Sometimes you got to swim in the muck to learn where the bottom is. So, anything else we played this week that we're a little bit more positive on?
Well, I've been enjoying Final Fantasy III a bit more.
Where are you at?
So, I think I'm getting closer to the end. My team is like around level 42 for each of them. I'm basically going into the Cave of Shadows, but I've already fought Odin. I've fought Bahamut. I fought Leviathan. So I've been going and doing the kind of optional bosses and whatnot. I definitely think the later jobs are a lot more fun to mess around with than the early game jobs. I really like Dark Knight. Dragoon's a ton of fun, especially if you just go YOLO and give it two lances, 2 spears, and basically just jump. It's like, man, that's a lot of damage. But yeah, it's kind of it makes sense that the game opens up once you get to the proper overworld because, well, and all that. But there's still some issues I have with it. I don't think that the game needed you to have 3 different types of airships that do different things. Why can't the Invincible also have the same speed as the Nautilus? Why can't the Invincible also have the underwater capabilities of the Nautilus? Why do I have to keep track of both of them at the same time? It's annoying. It's really not great.
So, Final Fantasy IV kind of does that too. Not as bad.
But
my opinions on Final Fantasy III are kind of clouded because, and I think most people, this is probably the case, played 5 first, and 5 sort of is just mechanically, anyways, just sort of like refined, better version. So
I'll say a lot of things. Like playing through Final Fantasy III, I have more of an appreciation for Bravely Default for some of the things it does. Like even just the simple thing of being able to determine like what the spawn is for random battles. So if you want to grind, it's just like, okay, you can just keep fighting enemies like really quickly. Whereas in Final Fantasy III, it's like there's moments in Final Fantasy III where you have to grind that you just don't have to grind nearly as much in Final Fantasy 1 and 2. It's like, God.
So my memory, like of specific events in Final Fantasy III, is a little bit cloudy, and I'm just going to blame that on the game being. I played it twice, once on PSP and once on PC, and it's just kind of bland. So it kind of mushes together for me. But I do remember that last dungeon specifically is a bit of a jump, and and I do spend some time like, okay, I just need to like battle a few enemies, kind of grit my teeth.
You know right away whether you can tackle final dungeon in FF3 or not.
Yeah. I have learned though that there is like a trick for grinding out the final dungeon in Final Fantasy III that I'm gonna definitely take advantage of. But it's like, man, it's like the job level grind and regular grind, and then I don't know, man. I feel like there's some aspects of it that are cool, like the optional bosses, being able to explore underwater, but it feels like, for better or worse, Final Fantasy II had a vision for what it wanted to be, and everything kind of points towards that vision, and it's focused. Whereas Final Fantasy III, it feels like it's trying to be a bunch of different types of games at once, and they don't necessarily mesh, and it just doesn't feel as cohesive as 1 or 2.
This is coming to all leading to James's opinion op-ed of Final Fantasy 2 isn't as bad as its reputation suggests.
Yes,
you're joking, but I'm actually writing that.
Yeah.
Well, here's basically the title for that is Final Fantasy 2 has issues, but the things that people complain about kind of proves that most people haven't actually played it.
That's a long but probably accurate title.
Yeah. Final Fantasy 3, I am enjoying it more. I'm actually enjoying it, whereas like in the beginning half it was just like, eh. But Yeah, definitely my least favorite of the original trilogy. Maybe I'd feel a little bit different if I was playing the NES version, maybe, but it's just like I don't know,
I
man.
would say the NES version is better. I think largely just it's like not as bloated, I guess, in terms of battles and stats and jobs and requirements. Maybe I'm not exactly sure. And of course, it's got a sprite style versus a 3D style, but I haven't played
It
that one.
has been nice playing it on Vita with G patch, so it's like running at native Vita resolution, even though it's a PSP game. And that's something that's worth, I guess, some novelty. But I don't know. I've heard that Final Fantasy IV is one of the a bunch of people I've talked to. They say that Final Fantasy 4 through 6 are all much better than Final Fantasy 1 through 3. So I'm interested to see how I feel about that.
4 is kind of it's almost seminal, to be honest. Like what an RPG could be. It has a few issues. Like I'm probably not as high on it as a lot of people are, but it's like a turning point in like literally like the history of RPGs and what they could do. It's got a much higher story focus and things like that. So
it's kind of like the template that which most Final Fantasy draws to. I mean, you could say that about a lot of these early games, but I feel like 4 is kind of like at the peak there, where you might some aspects of 1, 2, and 3 are like setting off the groundwork, but this is where it like really started coming into form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because like I kind of just tore through 1 and 2, and then 3 I wasn't feeling it. I wonder how my pacing will be if I end up liking 4 a lot more. I hope I do, because I'm gonna play these regardless. It's just But yeah, next week hopefully I'll finish Final Fantasy 3 and maybe have started Final Fantasy 4. Who knows?
We'll look forward to it. All right, the only game that I've really played this week is a bit of the Yakuza Remastered Collection on PC. I'm not really like far enough to make like a big sweeping declaration of how I feel about it. I will just say that I was expecting the drop off from having played like a lot of the more recent games like 0, Kiwami, Kiwami 2, and 7, and then 3 is a PS3 game at heart. And I was expecting that to feel really awkward. And in a lot of ways it didn't. I guess the remaster itself touches up the game so that it still looks pretty good, especially in like the character models, at least in their faces, maybe more so than their like rigging in gameplay. And then like even though it's been a while since I played Kiwami 2, like the way that 3 starts out, it really is a direct sequel. Like it follows up on story events. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this happening. Like this feels natural. It doesn't feel like a big gap has occurred, even though I've played a few games like in the meantime out of order with throwing in Yakuza 7 in there. So it just felt like a natural continuation, and in most respects, with the only exception being the gameplay. The brawler style in the PS3 game, at least in Yakuza 3, I haven't really. I only opened up 4 and 5 to like test them out. It feels like really stiff and stilted, and it's just. And then even the progression where you like level up your heat or your soul or whatever feels really kind of bare bones, where you just feel like there like the I forget the specific differences between 0, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2, but they have more what is akin to like tech trees or whatever.
0 you had to like use like all the yen that you get because of like how that was structured. You always had like a lot of money, so you put money into your stats. Kiwami 1 was like a more standard skill point tech tree. And like, and then Kiwami 2 was like you actually had like stats on there, like actually putting his numbers to your stats and like getting, allocating those into different things.
But yeah, in Yakuza 3, it's literally just basically 4 stats that you pump EXP into, and like one of them will give you more heat actions, one of them give you more health. That's basically kind of it. So very, very simple, very, very much not an RPG, not really. But story-wise and presentation-wise, it really, like, I was kind of scared that it would feel like a step back. And, you know, it objectively is, but it's masked and, you know, dolled up in enough ways, especially if you can, like, crank the resolution up on PC, that it still looks and comes across fine. Like, as long as you're, like, understand why. Like, if you're expecting it to look like Kiwami 2 and you're like, this doesn't look as good, I hate it. Like, well, come on, be reasonable. Of course it doesn't. It's a PS3 game. But I'm enjoying it. I really do like how low key it is at the start. Like, two of the things that you're doing at the start of Yakuza 3 are like just resolving a dispute between a bunch of orphans about who potentially might have stolen some money from another orphan, and then like chasing a dog throughout the city that reminds one of the children of their old family pet. Like, it's just, I like how it allows itself to start out like these really low key human stories, and where Kiryu really falls into his father uncle role. And obviously, like, I've gotten far enough where I've gotten back into Kamurocho, and as any Yakuza game does, I can already tell it's starting to ramp up. But I do like that even Okinawa itself, where you start out, is like really quaint and kind of smaller and just simpler. And I think it fits with the story, because obviously Kiryu was trying to step away from the Yakuza and just have like a quiet, normal life for once. But of course, the world can't allow that to happen. So I really
entries. Yeah, I really liked Yakuza 3, not necessarily gameplay wise, but story wise and narrative wise. I liked it.
It just has like a really good vibe. I wish almost that more games allowed themselves to purposely shrink the scope of it, where it doesn't always have to be world beating, universe threatening. And yeah, I guess Yakuza's never really been like that, because it's always about a particular location in Japan. But even then, it's at the start of this game, it shrinks it even more, where it's just like, here's a story about orphans and children and like their hardships, and what happens if their caretaker is struggling to like meet their needs because the orphanage is in the way of people with other ambitions, physically, as its location on this island in Japan. It just, I like how simple it is. It's just very straightforward, very quaint.
It reminds you of like, if you have like a nephew or a niece, or like a son or a daughter, like anyone younger than you, really, that like what they view as like the struggles of their life, like what were the things that like matter most to them, what they value the most, and like what's really like kind of like the big turning points in their life up to that point. Like when you're all grown up, like that's relatively like, in the bigger picture of things, how you view it, it's like, oh, it's nothing. That's nothing.
And I think you can make like compelling stories out of that. These simple like day-to-day things.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really been like Yakuza. I don't know if this is something that Kiwami or Zero like really spearheaded, but there's always this thing where it's like the side stories are really wacky, but then the main story is really gripping. And Yakuza 3 so far hasn't been that wacky. It's been a bit more grounded, which I think I kind of enjoy that it pulled back from that a little bit. Like it still has a bit of it where I had this one sub story where a person was nervous and couldn't ask the clerk at a burger joint on a date. So he kept going to the counter to try to ask her on a date, but couldn't get it out of his mouth. He kept just ordering like burgers and shakes instead. And before he's done, he's just eating like 4 or 5 of them. And it's just like, yeah, that's silly, but it's not as silly as like some of the stuff in even 7, where it's like, now you're fighting a tractor, stuff like that. So
now you're fighting an oversized vacuum cleaner.
Or you're summoning a dominatrix to assist you in battle or whatever.
Are there like any outstanding like PC features or PC settings that stuck out to you? Because I played this the Yakuza 3, 4, 5 remastered on the PS4 releases last year, and they ran at 1080 60. But is there any more to their actual like PC ports that like they offer?
It's pretty simple. It has a few caveats, but they're all caveats that like knowing where these games are coming from. I don't look at any of these and scoff. It is capped at 60 FPS, but I guess like for a game that's like that was originally 30 FPS on PS3 and then 60 FPS on the remastered, and then like I guess I'm not really surprised by it, and maybe someone with a bit more savvy will be able to like dig and tinker and figure out how to uncap it without affecting, like, I don't know if this will have that issue where the animations are affected by frame rate or whatever, but it is capped at 60. I can play it up to 4K, and you can increase the rendering resolution to effectively super sample it. I can't test this myself because I don't have it, but apparently it does also support ultra wide. So that's always kind of a cool little feature that's above and beyond.
I really want to see that in ultra wide. Wow,
this is a bit hearsay. I haven't tested it myself. I've just heard that it does. And the PC Gaming Wiki website, which is like a communal contributed wiki about what features a game has or doesn't have on PC, say that it supports it. Of course, it has like some pre-rendered cutscenes, which of course are not only can they not display in ultra wide, but they can't be up res. So every once in a while you'll see something that's like a news report on the television in a cutscene, and it's just very blocky and blurry because it's at like a much lower resolution. And for some people that might be like really distracting, but I have the mindset where I'm like, yeah, I know where this came from. I understand why.
Yeah.
So, and then it has a few issues with like borderless and windowed modes. Not really like you can't play in a window bigger than 1080p. So if you've got like a 4K monitor, you have to play it in full screen. So just weird things like that. No real like huge deal breakers. Just a couple of caveats. Yeah, I'm enjoying myself. It's been I don't know if I'll play through these back to back like you did, but I'll probably keep poking away through Yakuza 3.
I'm really, really curious to see how Yakuza 6 on in March on Steam. I really want to see that at 60 FPS. That's gonna be like, for me, it's gonna be like.
Now that was the first Dragon Engine game, right?
Yeah, and it only was capped at barely 30 FPS on PS4. There's like it was like even stuttering a bit on PS4 as well, and ran really somewhat choppy on there. So seeing that at a smooth frame rate at 60, I really want to go through that game again and like that.
And then so I guess that's my my due date. Like, got to get through 3, 4, and 5 before March, whatever 20 something. That Yakuza 6
no more excuses. You're right there.
Yep. All right. So with that little footnote out of the way, I will move on to topic section of the podcast. So very beefy front end of this with all the reviews and features and things that we've been playing. As January has kind of trended so far, news and topics are a little bit spotty. Just not a lot going on, not a lot of major themes, just minor announcements. Things are just ramping up. The biggest one, and I kind of put this at the top, maybe out of a little bit of bias out of my interest in it, but Biomutant, which is an open world RPG that was originally slated to release in, I believe, 2019, has now been dated for this year for May 25th. And this is developer Experiment 101, published by THQ Nordic, open world RPG that, I don't know, it's not like any other game that I've really seen. It's got a very unique aesthetic. It's got a very unique design of its like protagonists and its characters. And then this game, as this is always kind of like inherently makes the game maybe more interesting than it deserves, but it kind of fell off the face of the map for like a year, kind of like Code Vein did before it finally like resurfaced a few months before it released. And then there was actually I forget if it was an interview or if it was just more like a research piece on, I believe, IGN, where they talked about how they took the year off because mainly, obviously, it was development hardships due to the pandemic and everything else about 2020, but also just because they didn't want to crunch and end up with they didn't reference this. They didn't want to end up with a Cyberpunk where they just left a whole bunch of bugs and issues out because they were trying to hit some sort of date, that they really wanted to try to polish up what they had. And even if that meant pushing the game back over a year, they were going to do it.
It's worth mentioning that in THQ Nordic's like annual reports or semi-annual reports, they basically would keep mentioning Biomutant because there was a lot of interest in it, but they were basically casual in the report saying, we are still working on it and we are giving the team time to make it, effectively is what they were saying. So yeah, exactly.
All right, so I want to go ahead, George.
Go on. Well, I was just going to say that I think what's so exciting about Biomutant is that, well, besides like the stuff we do know, there's so much we don't know. Like, apparently it's like a really large scale thing. I think they've said in the past, like, it's a pretty massive game. It's one of those games I just cannot put a pin in it why I'm so excited for it, but I just am. I think it looks really cool.
it just looks different. It doesn't look like, this is going to sound like really wishy-washy, but it doesn't look like focus tested or something that's like deliberately trying to appeal to a huge audience. It's got a very specific, almost kind of ugly art style because it's really trying to get this like mutant, almost like cyborg sort of aesthetic to it. And the article that I was talking about, it's an IGN piece that went up just, it actually says dated today, but I think went up yesterday. Biomutant, here's why the developers have been quiet for so long. And in it, basically, it's a 20. They talk about how the team is basically barely 20 people, so it's a very small team.
Wow.
Any game is going to ship with smaller bugs, but I'm talking about bugs that are truly disruptive to this game's experience. We don't want to ship with that. I think that's what caused us to just wait until we were ready to do it. So obviously, they're saying all the right things about how they didn't want to crunch. They really wanted to tidy up the product. They didn't want to basically sabotage it by pushing it out the door before it was ready. So
Cyberpunk.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It looks different, and definitely one worth keeping an eye on for sure.
I just can't believe it's got a date. It's one of those games. I wasn't expecting to see this till really late in the year. Just because of the silence, which it hasn't been one of those things where I'm like, oh god, it's cancelled. It was like they've said for so long, yeah, it is coming. We're just working on it, but to finally have a date on it, it's just kind of it's just cool.
They haven't announced. They didn't announce a next gen version. Of
that is a caveat. They did mention that this release date is for PS4 and Xbox One, and they were just they were just kind of candid about it. They're basically saying like when we were developing the game, we were leading it on last gen. They kind of left the door open to probably scale up, but they said it's easier to scale up than scale down. We don't want to just release it for next gen, which for the life of the game, this project wasn't. So it's kind of like they're just being honest and saying, yeah, we know we're going to disappoint people by not having a PS5 version or whatever, but they still have a PC version, obviously. And I think they do mention how it's easier to scale up. So they're kind of leaving the door open for a next gen version eventually.
I'm sure there'll be like next gen upgrades down the line for this game if it does well.
But they're just taking it, obviously, like I said, 20-person team. They don't want to bite off more than they can chew and have all these different configurations releasing out. So I just think that this is it's just something about this game just inherently intrigues me. It's just interesting. It's different. It doesn't look like other games that are coming out. So yeah, May 25th this year is the slated date. A few other little smaller topics from this week. This one's actually came out pretty recently that I think is pretty striking. Some sales updates from Koei Tecmo, basically talking about a lot of their games that released last year and where they have been standing in sales metrics, with the highlights being that it was led by Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, selling 3.5 million copies. Nioh 2 shipments surpassed 1.4 million. And Atelier Ryza 2 at 220,000, though, of course, this was before the worldwide release of Ryza 2.
That's worth noting that the Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity numbers there, that does make it the best-selling Warriors or Muso type game.
Zelda IP, man.
Yep, it's all about the IP, right?
That Nintendo magic.
But like just personally, I don't think I like Warriors games that much, but
I don't. I played a little bit of Age of Calamity at home during the holidays with my brother, and I'm just like, yeah, this game is just not for me. That's fine, but it's just like it's just not my thing.
I want to play it, but I can't. I want to keep holding out for Age of Calamity because, like, on the off chance that there's going to be like a Switch
Pro,
yeah, like because it doesn't perform well on Switch.
Yeah, man. If I want to play that, I want my first time with it to be like the best it could be, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Nioh obviously is exclusive to PS4. Yeah, and there's a PS5 PC version coming out, so that'll certainly get a boost as well.
This upcoming week, right? Like
the 5th.
5th, yeah.
I'll just throw this in the conversation because it's a very similar story beat. We have an update from Marvelous, who published Sakuna of Rice and Ruin alongside Xseed in the States. That game has shipped 850,000 units, which for that game, insane. Yeah, what is the development team of Edelweiss? Like 2 or 3 people?
Yeah, 2 or 3.
It's like 2 key staff, and then obviously a handful of like art contributors and whatever, like the logo, like the the more logistic side of things, but the actual key development team is basically 2 people.
I'll just be so happy if this thing. It seems like it all should hit 1 million copies. That would
That's
just be what a stamp of like success for that.
Yeah, it seems like it's only a matter of time.
The first Atelier Ryza, I believe, hit 500,000 worldwide. So this one is already halfway there before the worldwide release.
Yep.
And usually, obviously, these games usually sell more outside of Japan than in Japan, just based on volume, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see where it lands. Sequels don't usually sell as much as the original game, but maybe if people think they can just start with Ryza 2 rather than playing Ryza 1, maybe it'll do fine.
It also helps that there's a PS5 version.
Yeah.
So people looking for a JRPG to play on your PS5s, well,
yeah, they might just bite the bullet, take the jump.
Yeah.
So just to calibrate a little bit, Ryza sold 150,000 copies. Ryza 1 this is in its first week in Japan, and eventually middle of last year hit 420,000, which is what was the high watermark for the series. So I don't know. I don't know where it ended up though.
I thought it hit 500,000 at some point. I might be wrong. Let me check.
Well, this 420,000 was as of April last year, so easily could have.
Probably has. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just the benchmark, because that was.
I'd imagine that if it wasn't already at 500,000 before like the lead up to Ryza 2 in the West and in Japan, it probably reached it then, because they've really been pushing. Like, they had the reprint of the Switch physical copy that I kept missing.
Yeah. As of August last year, Ryza 1 hit 500,000. So very cool. All right, we also got just a few little gameplay trailers and footage from some upcoming games, and this one's coming out actually like next week. I don't know if anyone's excited for this except potentially George. We got a trailer for Werewolf: The Apocalypse Earthblood, and like, this is the sort of thing where normally, I don't know, I'm biased against this game. Like, there's something about this game that I'm just like, absolutely, I have negative interest in this. Like, normally before we do these podcasts, I try to at least watch through these. I didn't watch this. I'm gonna poke through it now.
It looks. I don't know how to describe this like cleverly. It looks like a PS3 era game, like not visually, but just like how it plays and runs, and the UI and the camera.
It reminds me of Rogue Warrior, like with the metal. I'm just like,
a PS2 era game,
maybe.
With something like this, I think I'm going into it with no expectation, so I'm not disappointed. So, like, if it turns out to be like the best game ever, which it won't be, then I'll just come here and be like, "Whoa, guys, we're all wrong. We're all egg on our faces."
Yeah, it's actually game of the year.
Anyway, since I kind of messed up, like, this is a gameplay trailer that was published like just under a week ago, or I guess on Tuesday, so 5 days ago, and the game's coming out on the 4th, so next Thursday. So basically, they're just the final push in marketing of this game before it releases next week.
So PC players are torn. It's either Werewolf: The Apocalypse Earthblood or Nioh 2. It's gonna be tough.
I wonder which.
For what it's worth, for what it's worth, this Werewolf game is not on Steam.
Oh, is it Epic Game Store?
Yep.
Oh, even better then.
Like, if one of you plays this, if one of you plays this and thinks it's actually like really good, please come in here and like substantiate yourself. Like, I don't know.
I think it's clear that none of us have like high hopes for this. I mean, I like looking at these games, these sorts of games, like hoping to find a diamond in the rough. But sometimes that just means you find rough.
Okay, so this is like technically our first Tetracast, modern Tetracast episode on YouTube. YouTubers or YouTube people, let us know. Werewolf: Apocalypse Earthblood. Let us know. We'll read it. Like, give us your 500-word essays on why this game is amazing next week.
I just can't build up any enthusiasm for it for whatever reason. Just nothing about it compels me, which I wish it was otherwise, but I'm not going to feign the interest. You know. Sorry. I feel bad for you. Sorry, Cyanide. Okay. We also got another thing that's coming out next week, which is Haven, which had already released on Steam and anywhere else, or was it just Steam?
Steam, PS5, and Xbox.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so next week it is releasing for PS4, Switch, and Epic Game Store. So Josh covered this about a month back. Had some criticisms, had some good things to say about it. So kind of an interesting indie type game.
Try to play with someone's special if you can. It's best enjoyed that way, I think.
So it'll be interesting to see how well this does on Switch, because sometimes these sorts of games, these little smaller scale, clever, clear ideas titles, seem to like balloon out on there if they find a good audience. So it'll be interesting to see if they explode on Switch.
Well, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it'll be probably more accessible on Switch because you can do a split Joy-Con configuration with it, because you only really need one half of each of the controller to control each person in combat. So I'm sure that they have to support that. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how well it does on that platform.
All I hope is like it runs well. Hopefully, it runs well on Switch.
We also got some information about some online games that are coming out. First of all, so this is going to be kind of a hodgepodge of topics. First of all, the published topic is that the MMORPG, it's an isometric MMORPG, Magic Legends, is entering into PC open beta in March. So this is a game that I think is kind of interesting, just because I think the setting is I don't know much about Magic, so I don't have the draw where I see things that I recognize from that world or that setting. But I think from an outsider's perspective, I think it looks cool and interesting. And the idea of having an isometric MMO styled game, I think, is kind of interesting. So
to be clear, this is one of those games where it was sort of originally called or billed as an MMORPG, but now it's just sort of called an online isometric Diablo that you can play with friends. So it's
you kind of have that weird Destiny style game now, hub based,
right?
Or you could even go further and say Diablo based, where they're trying to pull these sorts of features from. This is MMO like, but this is Diablo like, but this is Destiny like. And what do we call the product? Well, whichever one you like best, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't look like a traditional MMO like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV. It looks more like a Diablo with magic characters and dressing.
Oh, okay. I was like, this sounds familiar. This is that game that has a monetization model that's nightmarish.
Is it? I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the game. A while back, they laid out their monetization model. So I'll get an excerpt for this. This is from their own new story. Booster packs have been a staple of the Magic the Gathering card game for over 26 years as a way to build library of cards, blah, blah, blah. Magic Legends will also be offering booster packs as a way to collect spells and collect shards of spells in order to expand and level your spell library. If you choose to purchase these booster packs, there are several other types of items you have a chance to unlock in addition to spells. In addition to the classes that are included in the game for free, they'll be selling themed Planeswalker classes that give you more class options to choose from when constructing your loadouts. And then they're also adding a battle pass system. And then lastly, you'll be offering a variety of convenience items at launch, like XP boost, deck slots, and other items that assist you with leveling.
So I don't know if I'm a boiled frog, but cosmetics or even convenience items, I'm fine with in a battle pass, but spells and stuff. Then you just deflated.
I don't know. That's
okay. Yeah. This is a lot of this monetization is just like the card game,
right booster pack.
Irrelevant. Yeah,
it's to
make it better. Yeah, I was like, Magic Legends, is that the upcoming? It's like, yeah, that's right. It was.
Just a brief history. This game was originally announced at the Game Awards 2019, so more than a year ago. And I guess spent all last year just, obviously pandemic year, but just kind of working up towards the beta, which is in March. So
I don't know. Good luck trying to adopt the card game's monetization model or similar thing to an isometric online game, I guess. I don't know. That's the way, I guess. Well, we'll see how many people.
Well, how do games like Path of Exile monetize? Because
that's cosmetic and
all cosmetic,
cosmetic and storage inventory slots, like put things in for storage,
bigger pouches, right?
Yeah, essentially,
and that's how Overwatch does it, and Guild Wars and Phantasy Star. I feel like that's so prevalent nowadays that you can't even really turn away from it.
Yeah, people have been very like cautious of like monetizing around like gameplay related stuff. It's just mainly cosmetics or like
and you can go too far with convenience as well. But I feel like it's been a while since I played a game where you absolutely feel hamstrung, like from I can't play this game because my inventory limit's only 10 as a free to play player or something like that. I feel like most games, at least I've played, have avoided a big like you're expected to buy this thing as a convenience item because otherwise there's no way you can actually really enjoy this game.
Well, I mean, PSO2, you probably want to get a few inventory upgrades.
Yeah, that would be the closest. I think you start out at like 80, but then you can get up to 150.
You start out
like that.
You start out at 50, and you can buy inventory upgrades of 10 each. They're not too bad. I think if you're subscribed to Game Pass Ultimate, you can actually redeem it on either the Windows Store version or the Xbox version to get like Arts cash. I think you can exchange for it. It's something. But
yeah, to try to tie this back into Legends, it seems like cosmetics we're all pretty much okay with. Convenience depends how it's implemented. Gameplay systems, that's a hard sell.
I don't know, man.
Well, this is free to play, so maybe I'll download it in March and see how bad it is. You've deflated my interest, which was already kind of like cursory in the first place, but now you're kind of like, oh.
I'm sorry, I remember stuff. Sorry.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought it up. Some of the other games that like similar news stories, I'll just kind of rattle them off and see if we're interested in talking about them. Old School RuneScape, OSRS.
Let's go. Hell yeah.
is launching for Steam at the end of next month, February 24th.
Buying GF.
So basically you'll have, so in case you haven't been following, RuneScape as it currently is, so modern RuneScape, as much as that term means something, is already on Steam. But this will be Old School RuneScape coming to Steam by this year, so you'll be able to play two versions of it.
So even then, Old School RuneScape is still, in my mind, new RuneScape because I played Ancient School RuneScape where it was like.
Yeah, I remember when you had to like when the decision was like RuneScape versus RuneScape 2, but until RuneScape 2 just became RuneScape, and like Old School RuneScape was not this Old School RuneScape. It's just
and modern RuneScape is RuneScape 3. It's weird.
Yeah, this isn't the RuneScape I still remember, man. I'm remembering like there was like a wilderness area and like rune armor was like purple and there's like PvP everywhere. That's the RuneScape that I remember, which is like one of the very first versions of it. RuneScape.
Some other online focus games. The new Elder Scrolls Online expansion is coming out in June. This is Elder Scrolls Online Blackwood. They call these expansions, but it feels like they're more like chapters. Like they have a little bit more metered release when it comes to like the typical 2-year schedule that we see from like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14. So I don't think any of us here play Elder Scrolls Online to really talk about like what the scope of these things are, but still seems like it's going strong, releasing yet another package for this year. So coming out this month, or not this month, this summer in June.
Well, it's how Bethesda like structures these updates is it actually formats it like 2021 is the Gate of Oblivion event, and that starts like in March with the existing game. Like you start this event in the storyline there, and then in the summer you have to buy the expansion to continue it. And they've actually done that like the last 3 years.
The chronology is like it's like these events are like set 800 years before the Oblivion game came out.
Oh yeah, this one is.
Yeah.
Yeah, even on the thumbnail for the trailer, it says the Elder Scrolls Online Blackwood, parts of the Gates of Oblivion. So
from what I have heard, people who are really into like Elder Scrolls and the lore and the story, like I know Elder Scrolls Online had a rocky start, but it seems like these updates now have been pretty solid. And you know, for that player base who's into these online games to know you're getting new storylines every year. I mean, you have to buy an expansion every year, I guess, but.
Well, it is a buy to play model, so there is no sub. So this is kind of like
it's optional sub, right? I think
in my mind, like Elder Scrolls Online people are like in that comfy period, like FF11 players. Like there's content, they enjoy the content they have. There seems to be always new content coming for them, and it's like we've been playing this for a while, and we're comfortable wherever we are because now it's stabilized, and the content we've been keep on getting is like really good for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool.
One of those
I wanna
games that I
play.
would be interested in if I didn't have, like, if I wasn't looking uphill at 200 hours of stuff. Though I guess they do try to make it so that every packaged update is like a good starting point, unlike Final Fantasy 14, where it's like a contiguous story.
Yeah, you're supposed to be able to start with any update. Like, I want to start with the Skyrim one, which is Greymoor. You can do that. Or I want to start with the Morrowind one, which I think was just called Morrowind. You can do that.
Which I think
So-
you might think that might be inherently less interesting, but I think that's probably mechanically more challenging. Where you got to be like, how do we make it so that a person with 30 hours on their account has as good of an experience as a person with 3,000 going into this expansion? I feel like that's got to be like a major task to try to balance.
Yeah, meanwhile, FF14, whenever its next expansion comes out, it's like, all right, hopefully the people have spent like 300 hours to make it up to this point. Let's go.
And then there was one more for Blade and Soul. What's the subtitle? Blade and Soul Revolution opens pre-registrations for its global release. So I don't know anything about this.
Is this an actual MMO on PC?
It's a mobile MMO.
Because I'm thinking it's like Revolution. It's like Lineage Revolution. And that was
It's just like Lineage Revolution.
Right.
So
same publisher.
I only know the Blade and Soul series by name, and this is the mobile MMO, which it was announced quite a while ago. I think like 2017, and then it's been out in like Korea and I think Japan and other Asian countries. But this is the global release. And what's actually sort of surprising is that the global release is for this game more than 130 countries. So it's like literally global.
Oh,
yeah, it's a lot. We seem to have people who follow us on Twitter. We seem to have a contingent of people who really keep on top of these like Korean MMO type games, and have maybe been looking forward to this.
Hey man,
So,
we'll see. When I was younger, okay, I played all the darkest Korean MMOs, Atlantic Online, Cabal Online. It's not an MMO. Guns, the Duel. What a game.
I think that covers it for that style of news post. All these online games that are kind of trying to launch or kick off in this year. So the last bit of news here is something that Josh wanted to talk about RGG Studios head Toshihiro Nagoshi. So I'll let you introduce this topic.
Yeah, basically, the Yakuza series general director Toshihiro Nagoshi. There's a big restructure down at Sega. Up until this point, I forgot how long ago he was promoted to CCO, the Chief Creative Officer. But I want to say it was at least a year and a half ago, if not a little bit more. But it was a short-lived position for him. He stepped down as Sega CCO, and he's just now serving as a creative director. And this, this comes to effect April 1st, as with most of like corporal shifts and big management restructures over there. I think this is ultimately a smart decision. It was always, I don't know if it really worked out to have Nagoshi in that position, because a lot of Japanese business culture is, hey, this person that really likes making video games is like, it's really making us great results. We're going to promote him up as like a general, like a big manager overseer of this. And it's like, maybe if that person just wants to like, make video games and is really good at it, And Brian, you told me there was a saying that you had the other day when we were talking about this. What was that?
So in my day job, I'm an engineer, and there's always kind of like this pervading thought where you should stop trying to promote good engineers into bad managers. And there's two kind of ways to interpret that saying. First of all, it's basically saying that you can't always treat every role in a company, especially one that's in a creative business like creating video games, as like a tiered ladder where you have to a person that's in a creative position like Nagoshi, if he does well at his job, we must then promote him to a CCO, which is more of a administrative position, I would presume, where he just might not be, his talent, his skill set, his passion might not be as suited for that sort of thing. Also, just the skill set required for those two roles is quite different. So that might be me trying to draw an analog to something that I know less about, obviously my day job versus working directly in the industry in a high position. But I can kind of see the understanding of where, yes, in a way you could read this as he's being demoted. I feel like it's more that he's being put in a position that he's better suited for, and it's going to help the company. Go ahead.
All I care about is, does this new position mean that he's in a better position to make more Super Monkey Ball?
Yes.
Ooh.
The answer is
Ooh.
probably honestly yes.
Yeah, probably. Honestly, yeah.
There is
Go for it.
there is a wider story here that we're not really the best site for this, but basically Sega and Sega Sammy is kind of undergoing a more widespread company restructure. They're kind of separating their console PC and their pachinko businesses, and I can't really. I'll just be honest. I can't speak to the details of what the ramifications of this are, what the decision making behind it is. But basically, Nagoshi stepping down is probably like one of the key fallout from a wider, more global restructuring of the company in general.
Yeah, it's not just him. There's a lot of people higher up in Sega that's like getting either shifted to new positions or like getting promoted. And that's not just him. There's a whole lot of other
like Sonic's voice actor.
like Sonic's voice actor.
But also, so like the CEO of Sega Sammy, I believe he's like 80 years old. And he actually comes from like the amusement and casino side of things. So he is not into like the gaming stuff as much. Obviously he's the CEO, but that's not where he came from. And again, we're not the best site for this. I don't know the details, but I know like over time, it seems like he's slowly giving more and more power to his grandson. His grandson's like 40 something, who is much more in tune with like modern gaming. And if that's the case, that sort of makes sense that like we don't need Nagoshi to be in this advisory role, like because the grandson is more already in tune with that. So like let Nagoshi do what he does best. Like I don't know if that's like a hardline plan of like when is his grandson ever actually going to take over as CEO, but it seems like that's sort of where they're leaning.
And it's like also like adapting to the times because part of this, I imagine, part of this decision to like ongoing restructures is obviously the pandemic is still an ongoing thing. It's probably still going to be an ongoing thing throughout the year, and it's still continuing to impact the Japanese arcade business. It's still not going to be an easy year for Japanese arcades. It was already not easy before the pandemic, but continuing to it's going to be rough, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Japanese arcades develop and what state they're going to be in by the end of this year. Because
I haven't been to a round one in over a year, and I'm having withdrawals.
Yeah, man, it's tough, but
just to put some names to this,
stay safe.
The founder of Sammy Corporation is Hajime Satomi. He's 78 years old, and then his son Haruki Satomi is also involved in the executive structure of Sega and Sega Sammy.
I thought it was his grandson, but I might be wrong.
The Sega Retro lists him as his son.
Oh, so I must have been wrong there. So, oops.
Yeah, sounds all right. But yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting thing to keep note of, and obviously, games where Nagoshi will be involved will still continue to come out. I'm very excited to see what they do next, what he does next. They're on a roll with both of the Yakuza games and just Sega games in general have been pretty damn good lately.
Yeah, outside of Capcom, they've had a strong last couple of years.
Yeah.
And that was the last topic that I had earmarked. I guess, do we want to throw an obligatory sentence about stonks?
Things happened at the stock market. It's wild. But, like, you got people who have listened to this. You probably know it's up. Like it was all over the internet. Stay safe. If you're participating, just be cautious.
I'm gonna say one thing. I feel like this is fairly self-explanatory. No financial advice, but for love of God, don't invest anything that you're not prepared to lose.
Right. That's sound advice for anything that you do in life. So have a good head on your shoulders. Whatever you.
I'm just enjoying witnessing this from afar.
I like the memes. I like the resurgence of like the solidarity is fun to see. I'll say that.
Yeah,
the solidarity is fun to see.
Yes.
So, like I said, the plan is to put this on YouTube. So hopefully some of you have listened to us there. Let us know what you think. It's just trying to have just another avenue where we've got access to this YouTube channel that is admittedly not used very often. So might as well put these up here. We used to at one point. Obviously, you can also listen to us on Spotify or Google Podcasts or on the site itself. Speaking of the site itself, you can go to rpgsite.net to read all the features that we talked about and all the reviews from Josh, George, and James. You can hit the link at the top to go to our Discord to talk about Monster Hunter and Princess Connect and whatever else you feel like. You can also visit us on Facebook or Instagram if you'd like, or Twitter, where we'll share our anniversaries of game birthdays, especially in the RPG space, as well as all of our links to all of our news posts. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Tetracast. So thanks for listening. Take care. Stay safe. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Later.